Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that talks with tomorrow's hoop stars. I am Rich Harrison. Thanks for joining us again. Today I am joined by the whole crew, Joey Bardack, and I just found out Joey has a dog, so we were like talking for 15 minutes about dogs. Drew Barton, who parents have a dog, and Josh Tischler. Do you have a dog, Josh?
I do have a dog. She's a Lapsa Apsa. Her name is Kisses.
All right, I need to see a picture of that dog as well.
I'll send it over. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have group chat dog sharing pictures. One of my passions beside basketball is F1 and dogs come before all of them, really, beside my family. Well, usually. Anyway, so how's everybody doing?
Good, can't complain. After a very long weekend of Division II college baseball that didn't go great, I'm glad to be home watching some basketball and not going in for the next couple of days. So
I almost spit out my drink because Drew and I were talking over the weekend about baseball and covering D2 baseball. So when he brought that up, it reminded me of our chat, and I almost laughed. This is a first for me, gentlemen, since November. I am all caught up on watching my games. All caught up.
There we go.
I am not like when my wife was went through surgery and everything, I was like 2 weeks behind. And then for the last couple of weeks I've been like 2 days behind, and I was 1 day behind, and now I'm caught up. So life is wonderful. All right. So what we'll do is we were going to talk about the auto biz, but what we'll do when we get down to our picks, we'll kind of review where all the conference tournaments sit. So we'll skip that part. Coach firings. Who is the ESPN announcer who's Ivy League kid, former Ivy League guy? He's really into the betting show that they have, and Dallin Cup. Anyway, he made the greatest joke when they announced that Kevin Keating was fired from NC State. He goes, Kevin Keating was fired from NC State. Last year, he took his team to the Final Four, and I think we're all old enough to remember that. It's just reminding me of the things I say to you guys, like, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I think we are old enough to remember that Kevin Keating took his team to the Final Four last year. All I can say is I'm shocked. Anybody else?
I mean, it's kind of interesting because I feel like it's kind of counterintuitive to what we normally see from just coaches in general in sports, where like one good run can buys you a lot of time. And this might have been a situation where looking at the whole of the body of work and not getting so caught up. I mean, you look at like the state of college basketball, and it's like, okay, you went on a Cinderella run, but like there's probably a lot more meat that's been left on the bone over the years. And so I can kind of give them credit almost for kind of, I guess, having the courage to fire a guy coming off a Final Four run, followed by a pretty disappointing year, like, and prior to that run.
They didn't even make the ACC tournament, which is another topic we can throw in there. But anyway, teams not making the tournament.
I actually think it almost is a kind of, I kind of like it, to be honest, because I'm so tired of coaches riding the waves of like 1 year of success and just never going anywhere. I mean, I look at some of the coaches like in the WCC, how was it Lavin over at San Diego still has a job because of promises, and that he's got more NIL now, and they're just kind of dragging that out. It's like, went to a Final Four, but you haven't really done anything since. I don't know. It's kind of refreshing. I'm surprised it happened, but at the same time, it's like 1 year not make it the career. Like we hold this players to the same standard. Like you can't just ride a 1 year.
I hear you. I hear you. What that team did was pretty darn remarkable. And this year we didn't predict great things from them. I thought they'd be middle of the pack. You weren't as high on them, Drew, during the preview. And I thought they would probably, get in or be a bubble team for sure, but they weren't even close. Admittedly, even last year when they got to the Final Four, their record was they were like the 10th or 11th seed in the ACC tournament.
How much of that is like March magic too? Like,
Right.
it happens. Teams get hot, but like, I don't know. I just
Right.
think,
And DJ Burns was a really weird matchup type of
yeah,
player. But here's the thing. I hear what you're saying, because basically we're rewarding him because his team was so middling last year and they ended up in the Final Four. But really, I mean, that's the way NC State has kind of been his whole tenure. They kind of been middling. And the fact that he got them to the Final Four was about the only thing you could say, but he got them to the Final Four. The reason why we're so impressed is because the team was so poor before then. But I really don't think it's never been the situation with him where he's had a ton of talent and hasn't come through. So is that his fault? Is that his fault? These days, money. See, before we could blame the coach for not being a good recruiting tool, but now money comes into the game, and that could be totally out of the coach's hands.
Yeah. I mean, I just think how long has Keith been there? He's been there for what? 20, was it 2016?
He's been there
17?
2017, I think.
20, okay, so it's like, I mean, he's got what? I'm pulling it up right now. He's got 1, 2, 3. He's got 5 20-win seasons. He's just under 60% winning percentage, but like his best year in the ACC was his first when they tied for third. And outside of last year's run, he's only got 2 other tournament appearances, and they were bumped in the first round both times.
Right.
And it's
They were kind of like first 4 in type of.
Yeah, I mean, they were an 11 seed last year. I think they were an 11 seed or 10 seed 2 years ago. Like, I don't know. I said it's kind of refreshing to me that, like, a mediocre coach who, like, look, he's better than I ever will be. Sure, fine. If people want to point that, I couldn't coach that team. Sure, you're right. I'm not an ACC caliber coach. Fine, but he's been there that long. I can hold him to a standard, and it's like the league was bad this year, actively bad this year. And if you're that good of a coach in a league this week, you probably should have been able to make some noise, do something. Finishing 10th, I don't know. Like I said, kind of refreshing, to be honest, because I'm really tired of looking up to my favorite teams and seeing a guy who sucks get a job because he's somebody's buddy or just because he's been a head coach before. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Before we move on to some of the other coaching changes, I want to ask you guys what you think about, some of the teams like Nebraska who had been a bubble team. And we commented a couple of weeks ago when we were talking solely about the Big Ten that we thought that they were the shakiest bubble team, out there. And now they've lost 5 straight and won't even be in the Big Ten tournament. What do you think about the ACC? And I think the ACC and the Big Ten are the only 2 conferences that are cutting off and not allowing 3 teams each into their tournament. What do you guys think about that? I mean, they have an even number. It certainly could be worked out. You Big Ten guys got to have an opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of sort of like an incentive now, I feel like. And like, I don't know, I'm like looking at like, some of these like teams that, you don't really expect, to do well, but, like looking at like Penn State, Northwestern, and like, I think it's harder for those teams to get in, obviously, because a lot of these, bigger programs, do well, like Indiana, North Carolina, who, even though have had not a great year, like they're always, involved because of their name. And I think this is like, it's good for college basketball, I believe. I don't think everyone should have like a chance in a say. I think everyone should equally, work hard in the tournament. So, and I think it was just like a terrible letdown for Nebraska because I thought they were a decent team, in the middle of the season. I thought they could do something in the tournament, and like you lose your last 5 to the other teams that lost or not even in the tournament too. Like, Penn State, Northwestern, like those games you got to win. But
right.
I don't know.
It certainly made yesterday's game against Iowa pretty darn interesting. And it was a play-in game. It was a play-in game. So, and they lost that at home. And they pretty much trailed the whole game. It was a close game, but they pretty much trailed the whole game. And then toward the end, it got a little out of control, but that was like the last 2 minutes of the game. Otherwise, it was really like, a 2-3 possession game. Joey, you kind of had a play-in game of sorts, but not totally. You were at the IU Ohio State game. Maybe you were there too, Josh, were you?
No, I didn't have tickets for that game. I
All
took
right.
to the bar instead.
Right. I forgot about your drinking problem. So Joey, what'd you make of that game? Of course, your Ohio State lost on the road. Very close game, tight game throughout. I don't know how many times the lead changed. This team would go on a run, and this team would go on a run. It just went back and forth, back and forth. It's funny. I want Josh to come in on this after you talk. Indiana is basically using like the guys who were on the court, to finish the game, like their starting lineup from the beginning of the season. I don't know if one player, or maybe Renault, was the only player like from the starting lineup on the court to end that game. But Joey, what were your thoughts about the game?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that was like my first college basketball game in a college town that wasn't Columbus, and I'm really glad it was in Bloomington. Just fantastic environment. Like it really felt like the fans won them that game. It was just such a cool place to watch the basketball. It was an unfortunate game. I really feel like Ohio State had that for the most part, but you could just tell anytime the game was starting to get out of hand, IU's fans just got them right back in the game. They shifted the momentum so much. Like you could see it in the body language of the players from both teams that it really made a difference. And I think that game, solidifies IU in March Madness. Ohio State, I think it puts us in a spot where we have to do really well in the tournament, because I think that puts us 10th. So I think we have an extra.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think Ohio State's probably going to have to win at least 2 games.
Yeah, so that puts us 10th. We got to beat 15, and then we got to beat the 7 seed. I'm trying to pull up the bracket now, but
I think it's Illinois.
Yeah, which is going to be a really tough game, especially the way Jacques Jonas has been playing. And
Will Riley. Will Riley's on fire.
He's been,
oh yeah.
Dude, he gets anything he wants, that guy. It's nuts.
Yeah. He's probably the most under talked about kid that probably could be a lottery pick.
Honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want him to go, but I think if he went, he good chance he ends up being a lottery pick. But sorry to interrupt, Joey.
No, all good. But yeah, so I think, and even if some of the other teams in the, first 4 out, like in the same, same situation as us, if they overperform, you get some good tournament teams from them, we may even need to win an extra game to get ourselves a spot, because it's not just about, winning a certain amount of games. It's really about doing better than the other teams that are on the bubble with us. So that puts us in a pretty difficult spot. But I don't know. We'll see. I think some of the teams that I guess are on the bubble with us, we kind of need Boise State to be a little disappointing, UNC maybe. So if some of those teams could drop a game, they'll really make it easy on us. But yeah, we're gonna need to be at our A game against Illinois, assuming we get through Iowa, which really isn't a given because you never know which Ohio State team is going to show up. Are we going to get the one that beat Purdue, or are we going to get the one that lost by 20 to Northwestern? We really don't know.
Right. So, Joshua, what do you make of all these backups actually being on the floor while people, that started the season are sitting on the bench?
I looked throughout the season, and it was for the start to the middle of the season. It was very disappointing, just how these players have been turning out. I had a lot of hopes for Mackenzie Mbako, just his offensive potential. I think he could have been one of the best players in college basketball, but if he's not shooting the ball well, he's already a defensive liability out there. But if he's not shooting the ball out there, he's got to be on the bench. And it's this whole thing is next man up mentality. You got a guy like Anthony Leo who's been sitting on the bench for 4 years basically, and barely had played any of those years.
4.5 years.
4.5, yeah. Honestly, yeah, 4.5 years. He didn't the start of the year, he played no minutes, barely, nothing. And now he's one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten currently. And, he's giving problems to all these top players. You see with Bruce Thornton didn't have the best game when, Braden Smith came in, and it was hard for him to go around with him. And he's really been tremendous defensively. And of all, I've never been the biggest Trey Galloway guy, but he's really come up sharp for the Hoosiers recently. He's really been the number one guy for them, big shots, keeps hitting them. And, it's kind of, it's bittersweet at the end. It's Woodson's last season, and, they're really trying hard, to play well, and end off on a good note. And, that's it. I think Ohio State, they had that game they had the game basically, and, it was hard to get back in, but those fans, like Joey said, they really, it's like a light bulb that just goes off, and just a whole momentum shifter. I think it's like it's a cathedral of basketball, that place. It's crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of those places it's on my bucket list for, to go watch a basketball game.
It's amazing, man. Like it's beautiful. It's awesome.
All right, so we'll move on to other coaching changes. Steve Donahue is been let go from Penn. You guys may or may not remember, Penn and Princeton really have always been the cream of the crop in basketball in this conference. And Princeton remains, one of the best teams year in and year out, but Penn hasn't. So that firing is not surprising. Of course, any Ivy League job is difficult because they don't give scholarships. They don't really have NIL. All they can offer you is an Ivy League education, but in order to finance that, you have to go through all kinds of financial aid, which I'm sure all the players manage to do. It's not the easiest place to win at an Ivy League school. But the good thing is, in this day and age, you do have a lot of continuity usually in your roster. And though that's starting to change a little bit for the Ivy League. And so teams like Yale and Princeton and Cornell can give teams fits in March Madness because the players are just so cohesive, so experienced, and so smart, which isn't a surprise. Craig Smith's let go from Utah. Now, of course, Utah has been really a middling team for quite some time. In this, we're back in the 90s, early 2000s, Utah was, I'm not sure when they made the switch over to the Pac-12, but in the Mountain West, I don't even know if it was called the Mountain West at the time. It may have still been called the Western Athletic. But anyway, before they moved into the Pac-12, they were a pretty dominant team, played in the national championship one year. This was all mainly under Rick Majerus, but, they've had their moments, but certainly I don't think it's a big surprise that Craig Smith has been let go at Utah. Anyone disagree with me?
It had to be done. That just absolutely 100% had to be done. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, they're not really bringing in, unlike BYU, they're not really bringing in any really star quality players. I mean, BYU is just going to dominate that state. Utah State survives. I'm not sure how Utah State survives. Every year they have a good team, and it's a different coach, and
it's 3 of the last 4 years they've had a different coach or something like that.
I think it might be 4 of the last.
Or is it 4 for 4? 4 or 5? Yeah,
I've lost track. Jai Lucas is moving from as a Duke assistant to the head coach of Miami. I will say I've been starting to keep an eye on the portal, and I haven't seen any new Miami players enter. I really, Miami didn't turn things around under their interim coach, so I figured they were going to, if anything, maybe they certainly didn't get any better than what Larinaga was doing for them. And I don't know what's going on with Miami. It's been really kind of insane there for the last 2 years. So, Yeah. Any comments on that coaching change?
Yeah, I actually
I thought.
Go ahead,
sorry,
Joe.
You go, Joe. You go, Joe. You got it.
okay. I was just gonna say I really like this move. I was doing a little bit of research on him before. Some of the coaches he's worked under in the past include Rick Barnes and Shaka Smart at Texas, John Calipari at Kentucky, and now John Shire with what they're doing at Duke. I mean, if you want to play the coaching tree game, he checks off every box. I mean, he's worked under some greats. The way Duke has been playing this year, arguably the best team in the nation, definitely can't hurt to, take a shot at a new guy, a guy who's been under a good system and a guy with, those kinds of leaders that he's worked under. So I think definitely a good move. Miami, really bad this year after the Final Four run 2 years ago or a few years ago.
2 years ago. 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
It's crazy. It feels like longer.
I know.
The complete shift this year, real 180.
Well, no, it was last year it started. I mean, they had a team that we thought for sure would compete at the top of that division, and they were just a disaster. And then
Right.
it just got worse this year.
Yeah, so they've just been a complete dumpster fire. So I always like the idea of, instead of just always trying to go after the next guy, try and get your own guy, build your own dynasty. And I think this is a great place to start.
Yeah, yeah. The next one I kind of find humorous. The next item we're going to talk about, and that's Steph Curry being named Davidson's assistant GM. Now, Drew, I'm going to let you comment on this since you work in, on the front lines of a college program in the state of California, and you're very familiar with Steph Curry. So before I comment, I'm going to let you comment.
I mean, I just think that this is just the next wave, the new generation of college basketball. I mean, we had Woj moving to a GM role with, the Bonnies. James Harden just came out and, it was basically speaking on the fact that he's opening up the coffers and willing to do whatever he has to do to help ASU basketball kind of get back on the scene. Now Steph's putting his hat in that ring. I mean, I haven't read too much into it, the news just breaking, but the way I look at this, at least the way I'm processing this, is these guys are just going to be bankrolling these teams now.
Right.
Like, Steph Curry's in the middle of an NBA career. Like, I know he's on the back nine of it, but like, I don't think he's going to be sitting there,
right.
out on the recruiting trail. He's going to be cutting the check of, what do you need? That kid needs $600,000. Go get him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Obviously, he'll be around, and the sponsor. I know Davidson's already an Under Armour sponsorship school, and all those things, and I'm sure he's given back a lot. But like now, it's all just above board. I just think this is the first of a lot of guys we're going to see do this. But as a Gonzaga fan, Corey Kispert last year did a matching campaign during March Madness and basically said, "Hey guys, it's me, Corey. I'll match anything you guys donate in 48 hours." When they were gearing up for their Sweet 16 run, they raised like $60,000 in like 2 days, and Corey Kispert was kind of a catalyst behind that. If I'm not mistaken, it was him. So it's like, everything is just kind of above board. These guys are just going to turn into super boosters, and they're going to get fancy titles and get a couple of buildings named after them and an office with a plaque and cut checks. I haven't read it. I could be totally wrong here. I could sound
but there's no way he's going to be sitting on Synergy watching clips.
Yeah, no shot.
Prospects. Now, Woj probably is.
Yeah, for sure.
But Steph Curry is not. I mean, they might have him like at live workouts if they have like, they're trying to pick between like, 3 prospects and they can only take 2 or something like that. They might have him watch the workouts. But other than that, that's probably as much as he's doing. He's there as a recruiting tool and also, to generate money. All right. So, now I want to talk a little bit about the transfer portal. And I can't believe that they let the portal open now. I don't know, because if you're playing in the postseason, you're at a disadvantage. Now, I know most of the teams that are playing in the postseason have big enough staffs that, they can start recruiting. But still, I just wish the portal would stay closed until like April 1 or something like that. I don't like the idea of players jumping in, but the most interesting transfers I've seen so far, are you ready for this? Jakari White of North Dakota State, who we talked about last week, and Jacob Agnasovic, who isn't officially in the portal, but I heard last night, as soon as the season's done, now they won their tournament and they're moving on to the NCAA tournament, he will put his name in the portal. So why am I so intrigued about these? Well, because they're seniors. And I thought, it was my understanding, and maybe you have a different view of this, Drew, but I thought, now there was one rule change. It's what the NCAA, I wrote to the NCAA, and they answered me. So the people who have played JUCO or NAIA in their careers are suing to say this shouldn't count as an NCAA 1 year. So they still should have 4 more years. That lawsuit is still in court. What the NCAA has said is, for this year, what we will do is, if you played any season in NAIA or JUCO and you're a senior due to graduate and move on, we will grant you 1 more year. This doesn't apply to Jakari White or Jacob Agnasovic. So I don't understand why these guys, Agnasovic will be going for a 6th year, because last year he sat out as a redshirt. So he's played 4 years, had 1 redshirt year. I think Jakari White is just a 4-year guy, if I'm not mistaken. So how can anyone look that up?
Just looking at Jakari, I know he only has played 3 years of Division I ball. He's only been at North Dakota for 3.
Not counting this year, or counting this year?
Counting this year. Like when you look him up, he's only played 3 years of Division I. Now I don't know if he came from a D2. I don't know, because it's NCAA in general doesn't apply to that. It has to be, to my knowledge, JUCO or NAI. But looking right now, he's only played 3.
I have him listed as a senior.
So he's listed as a senior, but I don't know where that first year. His statistics go 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, but there's nothing prior to that when you look at his D1. So I'm assuming
I know Agnasovic. Now, he's not in the portal officially, but it's clear that apparently he has come to the agreement with Lipscomb that he will go into the portal at the end of the season. And I don't see how he's doing that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write. I'm on good relationship with Lipscomb's SID. I'm going to write to them and get to the bottom of that. All
so looking just up Jakari briefly. So he's first out of high school. He played 1 season at State College of Florida, and in his bio it says he came to Fargo with 3 years of eligibility. So with the new
NCAA rule, he gets that extra
year. So he would be, prior to that, these would be done. He had 3 years left.
Right.
He's getting a year back with that ruling, because it looks like he played a JUCO year.
I finally thought all this stuff, because for me, I got to know when these guys are coming and going,
Right.
And so I thought for sure this was it. COVID year's done. Everybody who's a senior's gone. No.
Oh, no, we're making it super interesting.
I have to go through everybody on my draft board who's listed as a senior and find out if they played JUCO or NAIA. Oh, boy. Fun. All right. So now, as we move on to our picks of the week, we'll kind of go over where we're sitting with our picks. We'll start with the American East. All right. So nothing's been determined here. The Bryant and these games are tonight, I think.
I think they're tomorrow.
Okay.
They're tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
It's Bryan and Albany and Vermont in May.
Right.
I think.
Yep. So nothing's really been determined here. All I could say is our picks. 3 of us went with Bryant. Josh went with Vermont. Are still alive. So no news there. In the ASUN, it came down to the 1 seed versus the 2 seed and the 1 seed got to host the tournament, and that was Lipscomb. They had a nice lead in the first half. Northern Alabama stormed back to take the lead about midway through the second half, and then it was a nail biter all the way up until maybe the last 3 or 4 minutes, and then Lipscomb pulled away. So they won, and we all picked Lipscomb. Interestingly, the A-Sun is moving their tournament next year. They did all these games at home sites, so the home team had the advantage. They're moving the whole tournament to the Jacksonville. Now, one thing I will say, when I was watching the Big Sky Tourney yesterday, now that was the quarterfinals, but the attendance was rather sparse, and that's in Boise. And I'm just wondering what you guys think. I mean, I understand that, the Big 12, the Big 10, Big East have no trouble pulling people in. But a lot of these tournaments, man, the last couple of years when I've watched the American Athletic, I mean, that is, that's the conference with Memphis and had some other big teams like Cincinnati until they defected. But that tournament is held in Dallas, or at least it has been. And it's like a ghost town in there. You literally have, Texas tumbleweed, rolling across the court during the game. So the electricity at that Lipscomb Northern Alabama game, because Northern Alabama, believe it or not, is not that far from Nashville. So the place was packed and electric. You guys have any thoughts on these smaller conferences having their games at one central location? And Drew, you would know about the logistics here. Is that the reason?
Yeah, I mean, like the WCC tournament, for example, like obviously watching that, closely and everything, like the attendance is horrible, and it's in Vegas, and all these, which is actually a relatively easy place to get to from pretty much every one of those schools. And I don't know. I mean, like, I think some of it's just you're just not going to get a lot of interest on some of these, these one big conferences. Some of these early games aren't big draws, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of like, I don't know. I go back and forth. I think it would be kind of nice for some of these smaller ones that maybe have, at least in the earlier games, like a home court and really get that energy and attendance up. And then you can go
Then
central.
maybe have the Final Four at a central location.
Yeah, like I think that would be the way to do it. I think when you're talking about like, St. Mary's and Pepperdine, for example, right now, America's team, Pepperdine, by the way, are playing right now. And like the gym's got a bit more of a aura to it, but still, it's just not the same. I mean, obviously the championship game will pack out because you'll get people just interested in college basketball, fans interested will go. But I think I like the notion from these smaller ones is maybe do the first round or two, have that home court advantage, and then maybe centralize it for like I said, a Final Four or a championship game. It adds another incentive to do well in the conference, knowing that, hey, I'll get to be on my home court for, a period of time. Potentially, if I consider a 1 and 2 seed, I'll be home for the first 2 rounds. So there's that added, incentive. And then I think it also will help get energy up in those early games. And then hopefully the fact that a championship is, on the line, that will naturally get more people to go, especially if you centralize it in a location that's not like anything crazy to get to. I've been in Vegas during the WCC championship the last couple of years for when I was like at Menlo and stuff, traveling, not to go. And there's pretty good pool for the later games. Like I was in Vegas during the championship day, traveling with one of my teams, and there was great energy in the area. Like the airport was filled with St. Mary's, Gonzaga fans. So that was good. But in some of those early games, even when those two teams are playing, if those two teams can't draw fans to Las Vegas, it's probably not super easy for a team like, Montana or Northern Colorado or, High Point or whatever to draw fans, if in theory they were to go to other places. So
Right. So speaking of Montana and Northern Colorado, the three of us picked Northern Colorado, and Josh always has to be the dissenter.
Come on, yeah.
Montana, and they both have advanced to the semifinals, so that's yet to be determined as well. High Point, we all picked High Point to win the Big South, and they did so. It was hairy there for a while. I believe they were losing by as many as 13, I believe, in the second half.
And then they went on a 24-2 run.
Yeah. So High Point has something that nobody else in their conference has, and most mid-majors don't have. They have depth, and their second string did it. Their second string, Bobby Pettiford, who used to start for Kansas, comes off the bench for High Point.
Yeah.
And he led the way for them. So yeah, High Point's looking good. In the coastal, I always want to call it colonial because it was called that for 1,000 years. So let's see, where are we with that tournament? We are. So I guess these games were played today.
Yeah.
It looks like. So we have, first of all, let me check our picks. 3 of us went with Townsend, and Joey went with Monmouth. And right now, the championship game, Delaware defeated Townsend in the semifinals to move on to the final. And the other final game is between Wilmington and Charleston. So Charleston, who's kind of dominated this conference, could actually end up in the tournament again. They went down, they beat Monmouth only by 1 point. It was a nail biter. So yeah, interesting. 3 teams left there, and none of us are going to get that right. In the horizon, Joey, we all went with Robert Morris beside Joey, who went with Fort Wayne. And I really liked that Fort Wayne pick. I really liked Joey's logic because I really thought this was kind of like a 4-team race. I favored Robert Morris. I picked Robert Morris on the show. But you know what I did, Joey, that night after you made your argument for Fort Wayne? I went and put a couple dollars on Fort Wayne.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I say. Oh no, for listening to Joey, because they lost in the first round to Youngstown. So Robert Morris is still alive. They play the 6th seed Oakland in the semis, and the 2 seed Cleveland State plays Youngstown State. Now, Youngstown State was a team I liked in the beginning, and they have a big 7-footer named Gabe Dines, who may be, he's definitely going to be a pro somewhere. I doubt the NBA, but I think he's only a sophomore. So if you get a chance to watch Youngstown, keep an eye on Dines. He's a really good defender at this point, but not a big impact on offense yet. In the Missouri Valley, okay, we talked about Drake a lot last week, and we had their star player, Bennett Sturtz, who then went on to win the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year. And the one team we were worried about, and the team Josh picked, Bradley, the rest of us picked Drake. Drake and Bradley had a nail biter. Well, no, I take that back. They didn't have a nail biter. Drake had a nail biter in the semis against was it Valpo?
It was with Belmont.
Belmont, right. Belmont was the other team we mentioned that could win this. Yeah, they were losing to Belmont in the second half. And Drake came back and won that, I think, by 2 or 3. And then they beat Bradley by about 13, I think. It was definitely a double-digit win.
15.
15. So, yeah, so Drake's in the tournament no matter what. It would have been interesting if Bradley would have won, because I said, watch out for Bradley if they make March Madness. But yeah, they're not going to make March Madness, but it would have been interesting if Bradley had won. So in the Northeastern, we all like Central Connecticut, who had pretty much dominated this conference, also had beaten St. Joe's earlier in the year. And they are in the final against St. Francis. So who's the 3rd seed? St. Francis beat Long Island, who Josh said, watch out for. It was a close game, but St. Francis moved on. Then in the Ohio Valley, we had 3 different picks. I went with Little Rock. Joey went with Southeastern Missouri, but Southern Illinois of Edwardsville won, or SIUE, as you will see now on your bracket. And Drew and Josh picked them at plus 230. So nice win, guys. Yeah.
Shout out Rayshon Taylor. He just became the leading scorer of SIUE all time.
Right.
So
and you mentioned him on the show.
Yep.
Well done, sir. So in the Patriot League, I believe, am I the only person with a chance here?
I'm with you.
Yes, I am. Oh, right. No, Josh and I have American, Drew and Joey had the 1 seed Bucknell. They were upset by Navy. So American plays Navy in the final to get into the. I can't remember the last time Navy was in the NCAA tournament. The time I remember them being in is when they had a guy named David Robinson playing center for them. And David Robinson was so good. He was playing with like 4 guys that were like 5'10", and I think Robinson led them to 2 wins. I think he got them to the Sweet 16, or at least advanced to the round of 32. I can't remember, but I know they won 1 game and maybe won 2. But there is no David Robinson on Navy this year. Trust me. In the Southern Conference, who do we have? Who do we have picking? Who picked whom here, Josh?
I took Chattanooga.
Me and Joey took Samford, and then you took East Tennessee State.
Right. And
We all lost.
We all lost.
It just ended.
And here's the interesting thing. I went back because I was a little confused about. I said that who I had picked to win what conference, and so after our show, I went back. I actually picked Woolford preseason to win this conference.
They just won.
Wow. There we go. So that was my preseason pick, which I totally ignored last week. I'm an idiot. All right. So now in the Southland, what's going on there? I think that tournament just started. And that's the McNeese tournament, where McNeese is just a huge favorite and should be. McNeese is in the semis automatically. They didn't even have to play a game, so that's still to be determined. In the Summit League is the craziest of all leagues. I swear to God, you could pick anybody here, and we each picked a different team. And you know what? Only one of us has a chance to be right, and that's Josh, because the finals comes down to St. Thomas and Omaha. And here's the funny part. Omaha is already in March Madness because St. Thomas hasn't been in Division I long enough to qualify. But that doesn't count that Josh won't get the win.
They just ended too.
They lost too. The Thomas.
Yeah.
So Omaha won?
Yeah.
Omaha won, yeah.
All right.
Banging the garbage can.
We picked 4 different teams in the Summit League. What's the Summit League have? 8 teams? 10 teams?
9.
I think it's 9.
9. We picked half the field and didn't get it right. I mean, last year, Montana, there were 4 teams in this conference last year that were clearly heads above the rest during the regular season. Oh, no, I'm thinking, no, that was the Big Sky. When Montana State, won it. So that tournament can be unpredictable too. But I tell you what, Northern Colorado looked like a buzzsaw yesterday against Weber. All right, so now we move on to the Sun Belt tournament.
It's Troy beat Arkansas State.
Yep.
No way. No way. Wow. All right, so basically 3 of us picked James Madison. I picked Arkansas State. Now, I thought Arkansas State was clearly the best team in this conference. In terms of, if you look at the roster up and down, they definitely had the most talent, but didn't get there. Interestingly, in the preseason, we had one of Troy's best players, arguably maybe their best player, Miles Rigsby, on the show. So when we previewed that conference, though I still liked Arkansas State, but Troy moves on to March Madness. And Drew, you want to give us a West Coast Conference update?
Yeah, so they're in the the semis right now. So St. Mary's and Pepperdine are going right now. I'm actually have it off to the side, just kind of following along. As I've said, America's team, the Pepperdine Waves, which tip of the cap to them, because I'll be quite frank, they suck or have sucked all year, but they're hanging around with the Gales, gone on a run, and then later tonight, USF will tip against Gonzaga. And the Dons, man, got to give them credit last night. That was a really, really gutsy win by them. I don't know if you guys are familiar with all the stuff going on with Marcus Williams, the eligibility stuff.
No, I was going to ask you what's going on there.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into it, but he's basically been suspended indefinitely, which will mean the rest of the year because unless they win the tournament, they're not going to March. So they're
Right.
without him. And then, Beasley, a guard who I've been super critical of, not so much because I don't think he can play, but just from a physical stature
Yeah,
standpoint.
he's
in
only
the
about
conference.
5'10".
Yeah, he was fantastic on a bum ankle. Gave you, if you squinted your eyes, it looked like Isaiah Thomas against the Lakers back in 89 finals. He was phenomenal. He had a career high 29 points. So it sets up a pretty good matchup for the Dons against Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga wins, especially if Williams can't play. And disappointment of the year has to be Santa Clara. They've been kind of trending that way all year, and once again flamed out and lost to this Pepperdine team, a team that both myself and Jake thought had a chance to be the sneaky underdog that makes a
Right.
run, and they flame out. So we're
And
right in the thick of it.
Tilly and Ball, who had some injury trouble, they played in that game.
Everyone suited up. And
Wow.
Tilly and Ball, I think Ball, when he missed the game at St. Mary's, was a sickness thing. I think Tilly wasn't a serious injury. So I mean, they were, to my knowledge, and I have connections in there. Everybody suited up. Everybody played. They were all available for the full load and just couldn't get it done.
And blew their load.
Yeah.
All right. Wow, that's some crazy results already, and we, boy, did I lose a lot of money. Thanks, Joey.
Sorry. Listen to me this time.
Sure.
All right. I have to hit the reload option on the account for to put more funds in. Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on to our picks this week. The Atlantic 10 Conference. This is interesting bracket. The top 4 seeds get a double bye, and that's 1 VCU, 4 Loyola. They match up on the top end of the bracket. 2 seed George Mason and 3 seed Dayton match up on the lower end of the bracket. All have double byes. But 2 teams I think to watch out for, maybe 3 teams to watch out for in this tournament, because this tournament is traditionally crazy, would be St. Joseph's, St. Louis, and St. Bonaventure. But Drew, who do you got?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Dayton here. Part of this is a value pick for me at plus 450. I think that this conference is rich. I think since we've been doing this, it never disappoints. There's always a team that makes a run. There's always a big top dog that flames out. Dayton's kind of been the name brand, quote unquote, in this conference. It's kind of been a tale of 2 seasons for them. At moments, they've looked like a team that could easily get to a Sweet 16. Early in the year at the Maui. Then they had a part middle of the season where they kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. They've kind of righted the ship since. They just picked up a big win at VCU, which serves them well, obviously, for their at-large resume. But I do think now we're looking at a situation where this is probably a one-bid conference. I think that loss basically forces VCU to win or go home through this tournament. Dayton has to probably win at least 1 game to feel decent.
I think it's a 2-bid conference if VCU loses.
I think it's. I want it to be, but I think it's a 1. I can maybe get my head there if VCU gets to the championship and loses, but if they flame out at any point early, I think they're done, and I think they're done even if I think they have to win to get in. Their only chance maybe is if they get all the way, but I'm gonna take Dayton. I think the value's good. I think the roster has the talent. Like I said, this is a team that at points has looked really, really good. They should be riding high. They picked up potentially their most important win of the season. I won't say their best, but their most important win of the season. They're coming off that win at VCU. So I like the value. Give me Dayton.
All right. Joey, what are your thoughts?
I like St. Louis here for plus 2,000. Give me Creed Jabbar and Robbie Avila. He's got Gibson Jimerson.
Joey's trying to make up for his losses.
I'm trying to make when in doubt, you go with Robbie Avila. We saw that last year. Gibson Jimerson in his 20,000th season, still averaging 18 a game. The A10, in the past, there have been really big name players that have kind of led the way. I think of Bones Highland for VCU. I think of Deron Holmes for Dayton. But there isn't really anyone in some of the top teams that really catches my eye that way. So I trust Robbie Avila in big moments. I think St. Louis is a good team. I think they're flying a little bit under the radar which I think can be good motivation wise. So I'm gonna go with them.
Josh?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with the big dogs. I'm gonna go with VCU minus 115. I just, coming off that tight loss against Dayton, I think it's kind of a wake up call for them. There's a margin there of how much better this team is compared to George Mason, and Dayton. I also think VCU has an easier path throughout the bracket. I do like the Bonnies. I think they're quietly a very good team, but like you look at that other side, I think GW is also very solid. St. Joe's can do really some damage against Dayton that could match up. And I just think it comes down. I do agree with Drew that I believe that this is a one big conference. I'm looking at their, the net rankings and just like all the different quadrant wins they've had. VCU, they got one quad 4 loss, 4 quad 2 losses, and only 2 quad 1 wins. It doesn't shoot for like an out large in a sense. But I think at the end of the day, this team is going to come down. They'll come together as a group and they'll come out with the win.
Yeah, I agree with you. They've been the most consistent team all year. I love Max Shoga. I think he's the best player in this conference beside Rasheer Fleming of St. Joe's. And that's what I was going to say. That's one of the reasons it influenced my decision to go with VCU was St. Joe's is probably going to match up with Dayton, though, and I would have taken a flyer on St. Joe's like Joey did on St. Louis if they hadn't gotten their butt kicked by LaSalle to end the season. I mean, I just don't get this St. Joe's team. I mean, they have 1 pro, possibly 2 pros, and they have another guy who's an all-conference point guard. And they have if you took the best 3 players from each of these teams, St. Joe's has them, and they have some depth, not a lot, but they have some depth. But man, this team they can beat just about anybody. They beat Texas Tech, and then they lose to teams like LaSalle and Duquesne and in Central Connecticut. So I got to go with VCU. All right, so we're going to move on to the American. The American used to be pretty much a given for at least 2 teams. Not anymore. Not anymore. The only way, if Memphis loses in this tournament, clearly heads above in this tournament. If Memphis loses, I think they will get 2 bids, but that's the only way they do get 2 bids because nobody else really in this conference is deserving. The top 4 seeds are 1 Memphis, 4 Tulane on the upside of the bracket. On the downside, 2 seed Texas Tech, which is a surprise actually.
North Texas.
Right, that's what I said.
You said Texas Tech.
I meant to say North Texas.
Yeah.
And 3 UAB, the 3rd seed UAB. If I had to pick a couple dark horses here, 2 teams that I thought would be closer to the top of the standings would be Florida Atlantic. They haven't really gelled. They're the 5th seed. And they did beat Memphis earlier this season. And Temple, who also beat Memphis earlier this season. And here's what I will say about Temple. Here's the good news, I suppose. Temple has dealt with all kinds of stuff this year. They've had a player leave for personal reasons, a key player. They had another key player who was suspended, then came back and then got suspended again. And they have had, without one of the leading scorers in the nation, Jamal Mashburn Jr. has been out for, I don't know, quite a while. Now, here's the thing. There's been no word about it. At least I haven't heard any word about him coming back. So if he's not back, Temple doesn't have a shot. If he comes back, I wouldn't be surprised to see Temple in the championship game. That's my opinion. But who you got, Drew?
This is an easy one. Memphis is the best team, I think, by a margin. If they lose this, I will be highly disappointed. There's really no excuse for them not to win, in my opinion. I think they're the best team. It's not close.
And I think they're in no matter what.
I agree with that. I think it's a one-bid conference, but this is one of those ones where I'm like, losing would be very Memphis-esque, to be quite honest.
But this team has been a lot more consistent.
No, I know. It would fit the brand of the narrative of the last couple years. they've done better this year. I mean, it's hard to put your thumb and dominate a conference all year long. As a Gonzaga fan, we've had this dropping game to Temple. It happens, but like losing in this moment would definitely suck. But they're in no matter what.
Joey?
Yeah, I'm with Drew. Memphis. I mean, I think they're the clear favorites. I think this team could be a Sweet 16, maybe even Elite Eight team. You got the trio of PJ Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter, and Dane Danger. Just wait till Danger gets in the danger zone. Then Memphis are cooking.
I
But,
love Dane Danger.
It's a great name.
No, but I mean, I love his game,
well, that too.
Oh yeah, he's a great player. Yeah.
Yeah. We saw how good he could be at Illinois when he gets going. The one thing I will say though is I think if I did have to pick another team, I'd go with UAB. I think Yaxel Lendeborg has been huge this year, and I think I could see UAB making a little bit of a run, but seems like Memphis all the way.
Yeah. We had Yaxel on the show, in the preseason, and he's by far to me, I mean, well, Haggerty would be up there as well, but I think Yaxel is probably the best pro prospect. And the funny thing is, this guy didn't play in high school really. Started off in junior college and just went the most bizarre route. And he's, that I think player of the year in this conference. So it may go to Haggerty, but I could see him catching fire and being a little unstoppable and giving Memphis some trouble. Josh?
Yeah. I'm also with all you guys. I think, Memphis should win this tournament. I think Penny finally has got his guys. I think Colby Rogers, he's, a big X factor. He's very on and off type of shooter, but like once he gets going, he can really do some damage out there. But I will say, my dark horse, I kind of like Tulane. I think Rowan Brumbaugh and Caleb Banks have been stellar for this team, and they've cashed on some good wins, throughout the season. But I think it's still too much for what Memphis is doing out there.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the ACC. And I guess it's just like no surprise in the previous conference that we're all picking the same team here, but I'll let you each make your comments since it is a major conference. For boy, I've never seen the ACC be lower, in terms of talent. It's really sad. The top seed is Duke. And they are in the upper half of the bracket with Wake Forest. Louisville is the 2 seed, and Clemson is the 3 seed. Those teams get double byes. Of the teams below the top 4, the one team I could see making some noise in this conference is North Carolina. They gave a valiant effort against Duke the other night in the season finale. They don't have the size. They just don't have the horses. I mean, their guards are really good, and that's but they really don't have a lot in the front court, and Duke does. So I think, ultimately North Carolina ran out of gas. I'm gonna say, North Carolina is very much in danger of not making the tournament. And I've said this before. I've said it 3 years running. I really have reservations about Hubert Davis and some of the decisions he makes. So, but Drew, I'll let you run with this.
Yeah, I mean, coming into this, I think I actually might have taken, if I'm not mistaken, I'll admit it, North Carolina and Duke.
You did.
I think I took North Carolina.
On paper, their bigs look better than.
Yeah, I just thought the veteran guards, I thought they would give having a more experienced team, RJ Davis back. I think there's not much of a path for them, to be honest, to get there. They'd have to go on quite the run here. I think losing that game to Duke, valiant or not, was kind of their last chance to really punch a ticket. Now it's kind of, I don't want to say they have to win the whole thing, but if they don't get to the championship game, in my opinion, they're not getting in. And even if they don't win, I don't know if it's going to be enough. I'm taking Duke.
Well, to get to the championship game, they'll have to go through Duke. So,
Oh, they're on Duke's side of the bracket. I thought that.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, they'd have to get to a championship game, and even then, is it enough? Is it too little, too late? I don't know, but yeah, I think Duke's another pretty easy pick for me. I think the one team that's going to has the chance to give them some issues could be Clemson, just because of their physicality with their big Shefflin and them. They already won against Duke. Now it's at home. But I do think from a physicality standpoint, they can muck up that game. They could throw some looks and bodies at guys like Cooper Flag and stuff. But I think Duke is just heads above everybody else. I don't really see much resistance here. I mean, Cooper Flag is a first-team All-American and at worst going to be the runner-up for Player of the Year at absolute worst. So, yeah, I think Duke should be pretty locked in here.
Hey, by the way, I get a vote for Player of the Year this year. I get a vote for All-Americans this year because I'm now a member of the United States Basketball Writers Association. So I get to vote for All-Americans and Player of the Year. And I'm not going to tell you who I'm picking until after I picked it. But unlike some of those guys, right? Some of those guys hide behind,
Augustus Marciulionis?
But some of those guys who hide behind their votes, I don't think they publicize them. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I will gladly share my votes once they make them. Which will be in a few days. So, Joey, who you got here?
Yeah, I got Duke as well. I mean, the ACC has really fallen to pieces this year. Meanwhile, Duke, I'm really considering having them, win my national championship in my bracket. They have so many guys. I mean, Cooper Flag is leading them in every single statistic, doing everything you could ask. And then even if by miracle he's having a bad game, you have scoring from Tyrese Proctor, you have threes from Con Knuppel, you have Sion James, you have Isaiah Evans off the bench, who could be in a Devin Booker situation where he doesn't even get to start, but still has superstar potential. If I had to take a few flyers on some of the teams, Wake Forest, if Hunter Salas gets hot, Clemson, like Drew mentioned, has been really solid and has done well in past years. And if you really want a crazy Cinderella story, maybe Notre Dame and Marcus Burton, but other than that,
how many did he score in the season? Was it?
I want to say 40, 41.
I thought it was 47.
Could be. He's a tremendous scorer.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That kid's fantastic. He's so amazing. Fun to watch too,
Yeah. So no, I could totally see Notre Dame. I don't know about winning it all, but I could see them making a big run in the tournament. But in terms of winning it, I mean, Duke is just head and shoulders above all of these teams. I think Clemson could make some noise in March Madness, but as for this tournament, I don't see anyone topping the Blue Devils.
Josh, what are you thinking? I know we're all picking Duke here, but
yeah. So I'm with everyone here. I just think I thought it was a really disappointing year from the ACC. I don't know, you expect some of these bigger teams, do well, you put a lot of money into these programs, you look at North Carolina is a prime example, but even Wake Forest, it's that's a team that you thought this is a good chance of making a tournament, doing well in the
every
season.
Year we say that about Wake Forest. Drew and I have
dropping games to NC State, and it's not great. And in matters of Duke, I think they have a tremendous roster. It's one of the best I've ever seen. I think head to toe, just defensively one of the best teams in the country. Even their bench has been tremendous. I was never a big Mason Gillis fan, but he's doing well out there. Isaiah Evans has been a sharpshooter from all over the place. I think it's no comparison to the rest of these teams. Maybe Louisville can do some work. Friends had a really good year, but I still think Duke is going to wipe the floor with these teams.
The only chance I see is Clemson. Is Clemson. I can't see any other team beside Duke winning this. Maybe North Carolina could pick off Duke, but man, I mean, they haven't really come close yet, so I doubt it. But Clemson, to me, is clearly the second best team in this conference. What are the odds on Clemson? Just out of curiosity, you guys know?
It is the consensus plus 650.
Wow. I still like Duke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go, folks. All right, so now we'll move on to the Big 12. And the way the Big 12 breaks down, once again, all these these big tournaments are shaped kind of the same way. On the top of the bracket, we have 1 seed Houston getting double byes, along with 4 seed BYU. In the bottom, we have 2 seed Texas Tech and 3 seed Arizona. There are a number of teams that could come from the lower regions, mainly 5, 6, and 7. In that order, too, I would say, would be Iowa State, which to me is a little bit of a surprise. They've kind of slipped toward the end of the season because of some injuries. I really thought this was a potential Final Four team, and I still kind of do if they're healthy. This is the time to show it. And Baylor and Kansas are in Texas Tech's side of the bracket at 6 and 7 seeds. So that's how the bracket shapes up. What do you think of Drew?
So this one for me, this bracket, I think I had a hard time picking just because I think there's really great value here. I think I agree with you, Rich. Iowa State at times has looked like one of the 4 best teams in the country, especially early. They have slipped, but I don't think I'd be shocked to see them make a run. BYU might be the hottest team in the country, one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Texas Tech is scary at the 2. Arizona can make some noise. They've gotten hot down the stretch. Kansas and Baylor are 2 teams that have been really disappointing this year, but in a 1-game elimination situation, do you want to see Hunter Dickinson? Do you want to see Norchad Omier? Like, probably not. With all that being said, I'm going with the favorites. I'm going with Houston. I freaking love this team. They are everything that I was raised to appreciate about basketball, being the son of a coach. They are tough as hell. They play basketball the right way. They have that unkillable gene. I mean, I just go back to that game in Kansas, that game in Arizona. They just do not go away. Their coach has that team so locked in. He's a great coach. I know it's, the odds aren't great. I do think there's better value. I actually had Iowa State was my original pick here. I forget what the odds were, but that were my original pick. But man, spoiler alert, I think Houston might be my team to win it all. I freaking love this squad. They have finally, after a couple of years, gotten this offensive thing kind of figured out. They sit at number 10 in offensive efficiency rating, I believe. So I'm all in on the Cougars beyond this tournament. So I figure if I'm going to have this team making a very, very deep run come the national, I might as well pick them to make a very, very deep run in their conference. But I think there's outstanding value here if you want to try to make some money.
Joey?
Yep, I'm with Drew here. I feel like the story of the Big 12 so far has been inconsistency. BYU and Arizona are hot right now, but they really struggled at the start of the season. Iowa, Kansas, and Baylor are pretty much the opposite. So for me, it's a 2-horse race between Houston and Texas Tech, 2 teams that have just absolutely thrived throughout the season. I really do like this Texas Tech team. I was a little hesitant at first, but I love JT Top, and I think he's a fantastic player. I think this Texas Tech team is going to go far, but I absolutely love this Houston team more. I have them in my Final Four, guaranteed, maybe even farther. What I always say about Houston and what I've said the last few years is, first of all, the team players come and go, but the structure of the team always stays the same. Kelvin Sampson's a fantastic coach. And what I always say about them is that they are the only team in which I think watching a team play defense is fun. Watching guys like Francis and Tugler and Roberts block shots and, rotate like guys half their weight is just so entertaining to me. They always have guards that play fantastic perimeter defense, but then can also be an absolute bucket. LJ Cryer has been great. Manuel Sharp has stepped up. Even Milos Uzan has been really good at times.
He's been red hot lately.
He's been great.
He's been really good. He's won them some games. He's kind of he's had some Marcus Sasser-esque moments where he's been the only thing they can get going on offense.
He's starting to get my attention as a draft evaluator because he's a big guard.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like it was going to be Cryer and Sharp, leading the offense, and Uzan kind of coming off the bench or being the third guy, but he's really shown an ability to be just as good as those other 2 guys, if not better at times. So, I was a little bit worried about the scoring because, Cryer and Sharp are only averaging 12 a game, but Uzan stepped up, and between those 3 guys, plus the tremendous defense they have, they can keep it low scoring and just keep doing just enough offensively. So this is kind of my pitch for Houston, not only for the Big 12, but just in March Madness as well.
Right. Josh?
So yeah, I don't even remember Rich, but a couple months back when we were making our picks and stuff, Final
Oh,
Four, some teams.
that was back in early November.
Yeah. And teams that, they're a little under the radar that, I think they would do pretty well. And I gotta stick with my guys. I gotta stick with Texas Tech. They've got the Big 12 Player of the Year, JT Toppin, who's been an absolute beast for them. Chance McMillan has been unreal for this team. Elijah Hawkins can really dish it out. And when I'm looking at this, they're the only team, they beat Houston at Houston. And that was a great game too. And I look at this bracket, and it's like Joey had a great point. This whole conference has been super inconsistent, and just like how all the teams have panned out, just not what you want to see from the Big 12. But I look at this other bracket. I think BYU is a really good. They've been real red hot. I could see them matching up in the semis with Houston. That's a hard matchup. And I look at Tech, and I'm not very high on Arizona. They kind of been slipping a little bit. They're looking at all these other teams. I think they can. At plus 400, I'm getting good value here. And, this team is capable of beating, the favorites in Houston. So I got to roll with my Red Raiders.
All right. I'm going to say that I think Iowa State is the second best team in this conference when healthy. Right now, though, Keyshawn Gilbert is a little questionable with an injury, and he missed some time before. Milan Masilovic missed time, and they really struggled with him out. Curtis Jones missed time, and he hasn't really been the same since he came back. So Iowa State also has to play most likely Cincinnati in the first round, and then they have to play the red-hot BYU Cougars in the next round. So I can't go with Iowa State. Now, Texas Tech most likely going to be facing Baylor in their first game. Arizona most likely facing Kansas, who just beat them in their first game. BYU and Iowa State are probably matching up. I don't like any of those matchups, really. I mean, Texas Tech I like the best out of those three. I think they're pretty good bet to beat Baylor. But Houston is most likely going to face West Virginia. I think that's a cakewalk for them. And so right there, I think every team in this conference, all the top 4 seeds can lose in the first round. And actually the top 5 seeds can lose in their first game, except for Houston. And I think Houston's the best team. For once, Houston's going to be going into the NCAA tournament and be a good shooting team. They're a good shooting team, Drew. Every year we say, oh, we love Houston, but damn, they can't shoot. Can't say that this year. Though I will say Emmanuel Sharp, one of their best shooters, is playing on a bum ankle, with a big heavy brace on his ankle. He aggravated it in the last game against Baylor, and Baylor stuck with them for quite a while. But so that's a little thing to keep an eye on. I hope he maybe can take it easy, at least in the early rounds of this tournament. Houston does have depth, though. All right. So now we're going to move on to the Big East, and I will be attending this tournament, though I've made the decision. I made an executive decision, Josh. You ready for this?
I'm listening.
I decided not to go tomorrow. Excuse me, not tomorrow, Wednesday. I decided not to go for the first day. And you know why? I want to keep my streak. I want to keep my streak alive of having not yet watched DePaul this season.
That's honestly, I get that a lot.
I don't want to have to watch DePaul, so I'm just going to stay home and head in Thursday. All right, so top seeds in this tournament. On the top half of the bracket, we have 1 seed St. John's versus 4 seed Xavier, and we already know Xavier's matchup will be 5 seed Marquette. Wow, Marquette slid so much they've slipped down to the 5 seed. Creighton is the 2 seed, and UConn is the 3 seed. Of the teams that don't have buys, I don't see a sleeper here. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I agree. I think the winner is going to come out of the quarterfinals. I don't think any of the teams playing in the first round really have a realistic shot. They'd have to get through too many good teams. consecutively that I think are just better. I'm taking St. John's. A lot of the points I made about Houston stand kind of, they're like Houston light. They actually are more Houston-esque over the past couple of years, where the defense is just absolutely stellar. I like Joey's point about like defense is fun to watch, and they can attack in a bunch of different ways. Their defense turns to offense. They have the individual players that to make plays happen. You know, Ejiofor, you have Kadari Richmond. They have guys that can make things happen. The shooting is not there. I think I've said this like 3 times in the last couple of weeks. Is if they could just be a slightly below average to just average shooting team, they get a lot scarier, a lot quicker. But look, I look down the list here. I go, okay, UConn, I think they're just physically they'll overwhelm them. Like UConn's a 2 seed. I don't think UConn has a chance against them, to be honest. We saw that when they last played recently. They just punched them in the mouth and UConn folded. And I think that would happen again. I just do not think UConn has the guard play to go toe to toe with these guys. Creighton has been up and down. Ryan Kalkbrenner is a game changer. He's just such a unique like weapon in college basketball, his ability to alter everything at the rim and go get buckets on the other end. But I don't know if as a team they're good enough. Having Marquette sitting there waiting for them potentially in that second round matchup does kind of worry me, just because Marquette's played them well this year. Cam Jones is the type of elite guard that like you can't really ever, I think, fully truly throw him off, especially in like a big game. He'll be there. But I just think the Johnnies are the team to beat. They just play with such a fire and like a grit to them that I'm not worried about them ever bringing like their A game and their effort. And in a tournament setting, being able to bank on that is always a really good feeling. And I don't believe anyone's going to outcoach them. I don't think there's anything that anyone can throw at them. Dan Hurley's 2 rings, be damned. Patino's seen it all, done it all. So they have the coaching, they have the defense, they have the physicality. If the shooting can come along for the ride, this team can make a deep run, again, past this tournament. But as it stands, I think they're going to win the Big East, and I think they're going to do it in a pretty emphatic, physical, bruising New York fashion.
Josh, I said I don't see a sleeper here on the teams that don't have a bye, and I looked at you, and you looked like maybe you had an idea, maybe you see one. Do you?
Yeah, maybe. And I was like, I've kind of been on a bridge with with Kyle Neptune. I'm not a big fan of his what he's done, but I have to say there are some talented players on that team. You've got
Oh yeah. Kyle
nation's
Neptune
leading
always has
scorer.
talented players, and it gets them to underperform every year.
I know, and you just want to think, maybe this is the year. UConn with a down year. Nova's capable. This team's capable to shoot the ball really well. Jamar Burkis, Hugo Poplar's been playing really well. This is I personally
if they beat
St. John's.
They beat St. John's and they beat UConn, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they play Seton Hall, and I actually believe Seton Hall beat them the last time the two teams met. But if they can somehow come out of that one, they
never know, man. It's March,
they could beat UConn. They could beat UConn. I don't see them beating both UConn and Creighton, though.
Neither do I. But just from that, the first round. The rest of the teams, I don't have a single chance. I believe, But at the end of the day, when it comes to who I think is going to win, I got to stick with my Red Storm. It's been a tremendous year, for New York, all the Johnny fans out there. 18-2 in the conference, most wins in program history. I think this team, defensively is just so locked in. And I think one of the most important things for a team to have is that the belief that you can beat anyone. And this team just shows it all over on the court, that their last game they played against Marquette was a thriller. It was a beautiful game, overtime winner. Zuby Ejiofor has just been outstanding for this team. He's just named Big East. Unreal player. Big East
most improved?
Yeah, he's most improved now. So,
that guy gets offensive rebounds just by walking on the court. The balls just come to him like magnetically.
It's unreal. He gets like at least 3 or 4 a game. It's unbelievable how.
He had, how many did he have against Marquette?
Oh my God, I don't know, but it
was incredible.
But that's the thing, this whole just scheme is just based off, not worrying about the missed shots, just like control what you can do, getting rebounds, playing defense, playing hard. Like that's what this whole team has been built on. And in a tournament setting like this, it's hard for any of these teams to match up with these guys. So I really hope they pull it out. I think this would be a great, continuation of the story for the bigger prize, obviously.
Right. Joey?
Yeah, I got St. John's as well. I think Drew and Josh did a good job covering it. They've been dominant this year. Their defense, fun to watch, as we talked about a little bit ago, just so stifling. I would say if I had to pick some other teams just to make things interesting, you could make an argument for Creighton. It's March is a time for not just the best teams, but also the best players. I could totally see Kalkbrenner and Ashworth getting hot. Villanova, I could see Dixon and Poplar getting hot. Georgetown, even, we're going crazy. PV and Malik Mack. So I think there are some cases to be made, especially with March Madness experience that Kalkbrenner and Ashworth and Cam Jones and some of the Marquette guys have. That's pretty important. St. John's a little bit, they haven't seen that kind of success, but I like what Josh said. March, it's a time for energy. It's not about the best players. It's about the teams that play the hardest, the teams that put in the most effort. And yeah, I think St. John's would just run any team off the floor. They'd shut them down. They'd come right back the other way. Like Drew said, if they're hitting their shots, they're gonna be really dangerous. This isn't the pick I'm not super confident in this team just because we see so much parity in the Big East. Like truly anyone can beat anyone. I really wouldn't be
of the top 4 or 5.
Yeah. But like I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if we see Creighton winning or if we see Marquette winning, Cam Jones gets hot. We see how dominant he is. He's going left every time and you still can't stop him. Yeah, so there are some good teams. It won't be easy. I'm not super confident in it, but if I had to put money on it, life on the line, I would go St. John's.
Right. I too am going with St. John's. Marquette could give them a game, but Marquette might not be there either. I mean, they are playing, Marquette and Xavier, match up in that first round game. So I like Marquette's chances better against St. John's than I do Xavier's. I think St. John's is in the championship game. As we said, maybe Villanova could beat UConn, but I doubt it. I'll tell you what, Creighton, I don't know what it is about Greg McDermott, but he has Danny Hurley's number. Creighton always beats UConn. UConn has more depth, but Creighton plays with great continuity. And so I like Creighton in that matchup. And I'm going to go with the Johnnies over Creighton, but I think it'll be a really good game. So going all the way back to Memphis, I don't think we said the odds. We're actually getting odds with Memphis at plus 100. With Duke, it's minus 320. With Houston, it's minus 105, while Josh is taking Texas Tech at plus 400. That's pretty good value. With the Johnnies, I can't believe we're getting odds. I'll take it at plus 150.
I get it. There's a lot in the Big East. They're like, the Johnnies are favored, I think, but it's definitely no gimme. There are a lot of good teams in there.
Right. Okay, so now we move on to the Big Ten tournament. And so what we're looking at here is the top seed is Michigan State, and they're at the top half of the bracket with UCLA at 4 seed. Maryland is a 2 seed. Michigan is a 3 seed. And then we have a bunch of sleepers in the next round. Joey might even make an argument for Ohio State in the play-in games. So the top 4 seeds have 1 bye or 2 byes. The next seeds 5 through 9 have 1 bye. And then there are 6 teams to basically play-in games. But the 6th seed is Purdue, 7 Illinois, 5 Wisconsin, 8 Oregon, and I might as well mention 9 Indiana. Boy, I'll tell you what, 5 through 8 are really dangerous teams. Talk about parity. All right, so we'll start with you, Drew. Who you got?
Yeah, so I'm taking Sparty. I'm going Michigan State here. They are sitting at plus 250. I was actually really looking at Illinois here. I think that team literally has Final Four potential, but I just think the youth and the inexperience and the ups and downs are going to get in the way this year. But I think like if that team can put together like a 7-8 game streak, I think they can play with anybody. I just don't know if they can do it consistently with the age. But I'm going Michigan State. First and foremost, Jace Richardson has been so fun to watch ever since he moved into that starting lineup with that 29-point game against Oregon. He's been playing really, really good ball. But like what I love about this team is it's just kind of death by 1,000 cuts in 1,000 different ways. You have so many guys who can come in and contribute kind of at any given point. Jace and is it and Atkins, kind of the leading scorers, both of them right around 12 points a game. But you then have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys averaging 5 points or more. So it's just they just come at you in waves. They defend, they rebound, they do all the stuff that you expect a Tom Izzo-led team to do, which is be tough, be gritty. And so I just think that this is a team built to withstand, a bad shooting night from one of their top guys. This is a team that at any given point, a guy can come off the bench and blitz you for 15 points, and you're just like, man, I didn't see that coming. In college in particular, you can only scout and prepare for so much because, teams most of the time only have a handful of guys they can truly rely on. When you have a team that's deep and can throw a lot at you, it's just so hard to prepare for a team like that. I've been in the war room. I've done scouting reports at the D2 level, but I've done it, and you do your best to prepare for as many possible outcomes, but it's just not possible, especially at the college level. These are still kids. Most teams realistically can probably only max out at 7 deep. If we're being honest, these guys are going to be willing to push it to 8, 9. They have to. So,
no, I mean they go deeper than that.
No, but I'm saying like in your bench,
I see. Right,
a little bit short of the playoffs. But I'm just saying like they're comfortably like, oh, we'll go 8, 9 in the playoff game, no problem. Like feel very confident. Whereas teams now are shrinking benches to maybe like 6 or 7. They're like, yeah, we'll be 8, 9 and happy. And if we have to go 10, 11, fine, so be it. So I think that's a huge advantage. And again, you've got an all-time coach. So, I know we've talked about Izzo on the show before, and I'm an Izzo disciple, proponent. I love the guy. I think he just wins, and that's proven. So, yeah, give me Sparty because I think there's 1,000 different ways for him to beat you. They're not going to beat themselves. And again, man, they like John Rothstein says, January, February, Izzo.
Josh?
Yeah. Before I make my pick, I would like to say that I'm actually going to the second round of the Session 1 Big Ten tournament, so I'll be able to see my Hoosiers going up against Oregon. So, hopefully pulling out a dub there. But I think that'll be the end of the line for the Hoosiers. I do think Michigan State will win this tournament. They've been the most consistent team by far in the Big Ten. I think this team has everything you need. Head coach, one of the best of all time. You don't bet against Izzo in March. I think, Trey Holloman's really stepped up for them. He's become established guard for them. I remember watching that Maryland game. That was an insane shot from half court by Holloman. That was unreal. And even their bigs have been playing really well. Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper have been putting in good minutes, rebounding the ball well, offensive rebounds, even getting a couple buckets. So, the question about this team, it's kind of, it gives me a lot of St. John's vibes, good defensive team, but, the shooting it's the question, and, but this team's, they've been able to, get wins out of the ways, get into the basket, drawing fouls. And, I think it's going to be a hard matchup for any team in the Big Ten.
Joey?
Yeah, I got Michigan State as well. Never count out Tom Izzo. They're top 2 in the Big Ten in rebounds. They're top 2 in the Big Ten in blocks. They're top 2 in the Big Ten in assists. I was about to say what Josh just said. They do have very St. John's vibes. They just hustle every offensive rebound. It feels like there are 3 guys crashing in. The perimeter defense is stifling. Like Drew said, there's so many guys that can get hot. Jace Richardson has been on an absolute tear lately. Jaden Akins has always been solid. Holloman's been stepping it up. Fear's been a great passer. You have so many guys that can grab rebounds, block shots. They're just pure energy guys. I love this Michigan State team. Rich, we had them, winning the Big Ten since the get-go. I've been on this team, and I'm not stopping now, although it did take everything in my soul to keep me from picking my Terps. They have been red hot lately. Derek Queen is fantastic. Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Miguel. And that's why I really like what the Terps team is. In past years, you had your guard, you had your bigs, and that was kind of it. But I remember I was watching the Maryland-Michigan game, and Gillespie was struggling, and Miguel went 4 or 5 from 3, hit a few mid-ranges, and just totally picking up the slack. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Maryland wins this tournament. There are also a lot of really good options. Illinois could totally get hot. Purdue has the experience. And I wouldn't say they're going to win, but I think we could expect some pretty crazy upsets. I mean, with the way Northwestern's been playing, I wouldn't want to get matched up against them. I still wouldn't want to play Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. So I think we're going to see some crazy upsets. I think there's going to be a lot of parity that happens in this tournament. And I really want to pick Maryland, but I got to stick with the Spartans.
All right. I'm going to make a prediction right here. The championship game will have a team seeded 6th or higher. And
I like that.
I think that's either going to be Purdue or Illinois. And Michigan, I don't like the way Michigan's playing at all. That team, I've never seen a team more turnover prone. They've really caught on to the Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden pick and roll. And that's been shut down lately. And you shut that down, and Michigan's dead. Michigan's dead. They don't have shooters. They really don't. And Sam Walters is probably their best pure shooter, is hurt. So I don't like Michigan. I think Purdue, gets through there. And I also like Illinois because they're going to get Morez Johnson back for this tournament. And I think Illinois might be the second best team in this conference. This kind of like the way I feel about Iowa State. So I think they get by Maryland. Question is, who wins between Purdue and Illinois? I don't know. And that's why, because I'm getting odds at Michigan State plus 250, I'm taking Michigan State, who I think might be the deepest team in the country. And as Drew said, it's tough to basically prepare for them because they could roll out so many different lineups. And Izzo's not afraid to play a guy an extra 10 minutes a game, or he's not afraid to bench a 5-star and not play him at all. And so I think Michigan State's going to win, but at Illinois at plus 750, man, that is tempting. And I may change it before the show's over. But right now, I'm going to go with Michigan State. So if you don't hear from me, I'm going to roll with Michigan State. But boy, I'm really having a tough time thinking, do I want those extra odds? But Illinois does have to play the extra game. All right. So we're moving on to the Big West. All right. So in the Big West, the top seed is UC San Diego and UC Irvine. Irvine was, I think, by most considered the favorite to win this conference. I know I picked them to win this conference. I think UC San Diego is a little bit of a surprise, but these two teams are pretty evenly matched. I will say I saw these two teams play the last time they got together. And goddamn, I can't remember who won that game.
San Diego. So they split. So San Diego, because I watched both the games. So San Diego won the most recent time. Irvine won the first time. I think Irvine won by like 12 or 15, and San Diego won by like 12 or 15, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very even on the series.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I do remember, when I'm watching that game, thinking this is really not a conference where if you're looking for NBA talent. It's just not. Style of ball is not great style of ball. I mean, I can say that about other conferences we've talked about, but I just remember watching that and kind of being disappointed by the caliber of ball that was played. But Drew, you've probably seen these teams more so than most. Who do you like here?
Yeah, so I'm taking Irvine here. I think it's a 2-horse race. I think these teams will meet for the decisive third matchup in the championship. I think they're kind of the two best teams. Kind of like you said, Rich, this is a conference that's more, it's defense, it's ball movement. No one's going to jump off the page. No one's going to have any real impressive individual skill. It's more about just kind of stopping the other team and whipping the ball around and trying to find an open shot. And to credit, both of these teams have done that well, and they've been able to, generate offense, shut down their opponents. But a lot of people have San Diego as like a sleeper March team. I don't know if I'm there because I just think they're going to get overwhelmed athletically. Yeah. I just don't see them being able to, they're not going to be able to stop guys. They run into a Trey Johnson, a fresh, who can do whatever he wants on a basketball court. They have no answer for that. And there's a lot of, none. So I'm taking Irvine because of odds here. They're at plus 170. I don't think there's really, again, I think these two teams will meet, pretty confident in that, having seen them. But if you're gonna, give me a chance to make a little bit more money on teams that are very evenly matched in the 1 and 2 seed, I'm gonna take it.
I will say that San Diego does have some kids that can shoot, which is not something Irvine has. But what Irvine has is big Bent Leuchten, who was on our show a couple years ago, when he was still not a full-time starter, and now he's like Player of the Year candidate in the conference. Yeah, so I do like if San Diego's making threes, I can certainly see them winning. But I agree with your logic. I like UC Irvine plus the 170. Joey, I see you're going with San Diego. What's your reasoning there?
You guys know I love to find my mid-major guys, and I found another one of them. I cannot wait for the nation to learn about, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Aniwaniwa Tate Jones.
Yeah, he's a stat sheet stuffer.
I've been watching his stats. I've been watching his tape, I should say. He has been fantastic, not the best shooter, but he gets to the basket and he scores. He's very efficient, shooting 58% from the field, leading the Big West in free throws per game because they have no choice but to foul him. Also has 5 rebounds a game and 3 assists. He is a phenomenal player. And we talked about there isn't too much individual talent in this conference, so I'm looking to Tate Jones to kind of take over this conference and maybe even take over a little later portion of March. We'll see.
Who are you going with, Josh?
I'm going with UC Irvine. I think regardless of who wins this conference, I believe that this is a one bid conference. I know there's been some chatter, about UCSD, UC Irvine, how they've been playing, but I just feel like the competition and just how the level of the rest of the field looks like in the Big West has not been great. I'm looking for a little value here, and I think the Anteaters, can pull out a good win. I think they split last time they played, and I think it's really a toss-up with either team. I don't think any other teams in this bracket have a single chance of getting close to either of these teams, but I will stick with UC Irvine.
All right. All right. So I too, as I said, I'm going with Irvine at plus 170. So now we'll move on to Conference USA. Let's see how this bracket breaks down. So we have the top 6 seeds get buys, and the top seeds are Liberty 1, surprising there, Jacksonville State 2, Middle Tennessee State 3, Kennesaw State 4, New Mexico State 5. They're finally climbing out of the abyss. So we'll start with you, Drew. I know none of us have probably watched a lot of Conference USA, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm taking Jacksonville State here. This is entirely an odds game that I'm playing here. When you look at the odds, they're down at 4th at plus 800. They have the second best record in the conference. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't seen the level of competition, but they are 12-6 in conference. There's 1 game off that first seed, Barton Liberty, 20-11 on the year. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know how.
Yeah, I don't get that either. I mean, they have Player of the Year candidate Jaron Pierre.
Yeah, I'm just I saw that, and I didn't even think about it. I'm like, give me that. I'll be completely honest. The betting side to go over, I'm like, are you giving me plus 800 on a 2 seed in a conference that's not, going to probably be the most competitive, especially on the lower half? I thought it was kind of a no-brainer. I think this might be, in my opinion, I feel like this might be my smartest money pick in terms of just the upside to make a quick buck here. Again, not going to say I've seen a bunch, but I don't know how a team that's 17-14 on the year is sitting with the second best odds.
Yeah, I hear you. Thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, no, I'm also, Jacksonville State plus 800. They've got, I haven't watched a bunch of Conference USA games, but I look at these, the players, and I'm looking at Jaron Pierre Jr. averaging 22 a game, 5 boards, 4 assists. He can really shoot the ball well. He's almost at 40% from 3. I think I'm getting some pretty good value here. I think seems like a toss up in this conference. So, but this guy seems like he can ball out. So I'm going to go with Jaron Pierre Jr. in Jacksonville State.
I hear you. Joey?
Yeah, I mean, Drew and Josh pretty much covered it. I got Jacksonville State as well. Great odds. I've watched a little bit of Jaron Pierre's tape, and he really is as good as the stats look. He's, your prototypical wing that handles the ball a lot for a mid-major team and can just get absolutely hot. I mean, we've seen this version of player, just really make a big difference in March, year in, year out. 6'5", 180, can handle, can pass, can drive, can shoot. Like, I would not be the least bit surprised if Jacksonville State, when they win this tournament and get into March, we see him randomly have a 40 piece. He's just one of those players. Jacksonville State, they've struggled lately. They had a big loss recently. I remember. I actually thought I thought it was the tournament game. I'm like, oh my God, they're already out. But they had a big loss. So the team itself hasn't been that great. But I think having a player like Pierre, who is just kind of head and shoulders above any other player in the conference, I think that's going to make a difference.
Well, I have to totally agree with you guys. At plus 1-800, I'm going with Jacksonville State. They also have some size, which isn't not something that you will see a lot of in some of these smaller conferences. Liberty is super small. I mean, super small. If you watch them play, you'll be amazed at how tiny they are. At the same time, they can shoot the lights out. So that's one thing, and they do have experience of getting into the tournament. Initially, I was actually going to go with Louisiana Tech in this tournament, which was my preseason pick to win this conference because of center Daniel Baccio, who I thought would win Player of the Year. I thought would be dominant in this conference, and he pretty much has been dominant. But you know what? Nobody else on the team has really come along for the ride. Baccio's game hasn't really, and I don't want to put this on him because, a lot of times big guys get penciled into the post, and when they're playing against other centers that are 6'7", they're not going to take him out of the post, even if he can shoot a three. But I think Baccio can have, as a pro prospect, has the potential to have a more versatile game. But right now he's pretty much stuck in the post, great shot blocker, great rebounder. And at plus 1,000, that's tempting. But Jacksonville State swept Louisiana Tech this year. I'm going with Jacksonville State at plus 800. You guys have the logic. All right, so now we move on to the Ivy League, and the Ivy League makes it simple. It cuts the league in half, eliminates 4 of the teams. Top 4 teams play, and they are seeded as so. Yale 1, Cornell 2, Dartmouth 3. That's a surprise. 4, Princeton. Josh, I'm going to start with you. Who you got?
I'm going with the big dogs. I'm going with Yale at minus, I believe 160. Yeah, 160. When I think of Yale, I think of, I believe it was the Ivy League Player of the Year, or will be, John Poulikitis. I think he's had a tremendous year for Yale. I think they've dominated this conference this whole time. It was pretty upsetting to see Princeton do not as well. I thought they were going to have a good year with Xavier Lee, but I'm sticking with Yale. I think they have quite an easier path, so we're going to go with Yale.
Drew?
Yep, Yale doing Yale things. They lead the team. They lead the league in defense. They lead the league in rebounding. They have a big 3 that they can kind of lean on with Poulikitis, Townsend, and Mabang. All 3 of those dudes can hoop. They're the best team. There's a reason they only lost 1 game in conference and everyone else did not.
Right. Joey?
I'm switching things up. I'm going with Princeton for plus 1,200. Rich, I'm trying to get you your money back. Xavier Lee, I love this kid, averaging about, let me see, I think about, 17 a game, as well as 5 assists and 6 rebounds as a 6'3" point guard. He does everything. He can shoot. He can get to the hoop. He plays with so much energy. He plays with a massive chip on his shoulder. I follow him on Instagram, and just all of his posts, he is convinced that like everyone is doubting him. He plays so hard. He has such a point to prove. It's hard getting into the NBA from a school like Princeton, but he is not letting that stop him. I think this guy has pro potential, and I think he
Oh
is a
yeah.
and I think he is.
Pro scouts are regularly at Princeton games, which I know because I go to Princeton games.
And yeah, I think for good reason. I think he has. I think he is a ton. Like I think he could be a really solid NBA player, and yeah, I think he's going to be an absolute energy guy that could really upset a team. Like yeah,
I am torn on this one. Yale has been a buzzsaw in this conference, but Princeton, I thought, was going to be the buzzsaw preseason. Not only did they have Xavier Lee, they had Caden Pierce, who's also, a pro prospect, though I would say after having an off year this year, his prospects have slipped. Both are still juniors, by the way. So be interesting to see what they do at the end of the season. If you remember last year, Princeton was clearly the top team in this conference last year, but Yale was a solid second. And Yale and Danny Wolf ended up pulling this out. The odds are so slanted against Princeton because Yale clubbed them both times they played. I mean, I was there for one of them. It wasn't pretty, and that was at Princeton. So I get it, Yale, but you have to give up 160 to win 100. I'm going to bet 100 to win 1,200 on Princeton, who I don't believe is the better team. Clearly, they haven't been this year. Yale can shoot better, for one thing. But Princeton has enough talent that they should be able, that they can hang with Yale, and maybe March Madness, comes through for them this year. Last year, they were devastated when they lost in the first round of Ivy Madness. I was there for that too. Goodness gracious. But that wasn't pretty. A lot of angry people, Princeton people after that game. The press conference was not fun. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Metro Atlantic. We'll be quick here. I don't think a lot of us watch a lot of Metro Atlantic. Maybe Josh does, being from New York.
And I choose not to.
I am familiar with the top seed in this conference, and that's Quinnipiac. We've had, I don't know how many Quinnipiac interns we have, because they have an excellent communications program that rivals Syracuse and Northwestern's. And they have two really good players. But Josh, who are you going with here?
I'm going to go with Quinnipiac. Haven't done much, looking at, the MAAC, but I remember they did play St. John's. They lost by 23, but, they had some good outings. I will say that his name is, yes, it is Amari Monroe. He's averaging almost 18 a game.
He was our
boards,
preseason. He was our preseason pick for Player of the Year.
Yeah, he's the focal point of this offense.
I believe he won it, by the way, too.
Oh yeah, okay. So he won the award, and and I believe Quinnipiac, they got supporting cast. They've got some double figure scoring. The question's going to come down to shooting. The MAAC ball, I would say, is not known for their offensive abilities, neither defensive. But any team can have a good shooting day. So I'm banking on the Bobcats. Amari Monroe. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and you're getting plus 250. So
plus 250, yeah, decent odds.
Yeah, that's not bad. Who you going with, Drew?
I'm trying to make some money here. This is a bit of a dart throw to me. I'm taking Marist. They're the 3 seed. I'm sitting at plus, was that 1,030? So I got a chance to make a couple bucks here. Again, this isn't a conference that, in my opinion, blows me away with so much elite pro talent. Any one player can kind of take over and be unstoppable. I mean, they've got Josh Pasquarelli, who's pretty solid for him. I will say they have lost, I think, 3 of their last 3 games, so not the best start going in, but they are the 3 seed. They are sitting there with really, really good odds for a team that should be in the upper half of this bracket. So I'm just trying to make some money here.
All right. Joey?
Yeah, I got Quinnipiac here. Most conference wins, highest efficiency differential. Once again, haven't done too much research, but for plus 250 for a team that really, hasn't really given me any reason to bet against them. They're top two in KenPom in the conference. They're towards the top of really every major, per game statistic. So I'll go with Quinnipiac here.
Alrighty. As I said, I too am going to Quinnipiac. So the next we'll move on to the MAAC, or the Mid-American, and interestingly enough, there are no buys here, just top 8 teams. And so we have, and that's eliminating about how many teams are in this count? There's definitely more than 8. I know that. I think there's 12, maybe close to 15. So I think they cut the field almost in half. So no buys. They go 1 seed Akron, 4 seed Toledo, 2 seed Miami of Ohio, 3 seed Kent State. So Josh, what are you thinking here?
I'm going to go with the Akron Zips. They've had a tremendous year. I think I believe they're 17-1 in conference. I don't see a lot of great teams. They only have lost 1 game to Ohio, which is actually on their side of the bracket. So it's something to keep an eye out for. They've got, I think, great shooting. I'm seeing a lot of great percentages here. Over 33%. 5 guys. A name to look out for, Nate Johnson, 13.5 points a game. Seems like he's the guy out there for Akron. And, they've been playing some real good ball, in this conference. And so we're going to go with the Zips.
And Drew?
Yep. Take the Zips at 17-1. That speaks volumes. I saw this team live, albeit early in the year. But, yeah, I think they've got the size, the pieces, and the resume. I'm going to roll with them.
Okay. And Joey?
I have Kent State here, led by the nephew of Ohio State legend Jared Sullinger. I'm riding with Jalen Sullinger here. He has been playing really, really good basketball lately. 18, 31, 19 in his last 3 games. The Zips have been top 3 in every major conference statistic, and have had the most out-of-conference wins and the least out-of-conference losses, which, isn't the biggest statistic, because obviously conference play matters more, but it's worth noting that other teams in the conference, have lost several more games than them out of conference. So I like Kent State here. I like the Sullinger family, and we'll see what happens. Also, at plus 230 odds, it's double what I'd get from Akron, so not too bad.
I'll tell you what. I'm not exactly sure how Akron's doing it, but they've been by far the most consistent team in this conference. I think that this tournament could be won by 5 teams, probably the top 5 seeds. And so with that said, I am actually going to go with Ohio, which was my preseason pick. They did beat Akron early this year. They did beat Miami of Ohio. Interestingly, they match up with Toledo in the first round, and they haven't beaten them yet. They lost twice to Toledo. So they match up first round. So Ohio's going to have to get by Toledo. But I think the path then would be Akron and Miami of Ohio. And so they have beaten those teams. So, and what I like about Ohio is I think they have 2 of the better players in the conference in forward A.J. Clayton and Jackson Pavletsky, who you might remember had a cameo appearance with Iowa State last year. Didn't get a lot of run. So he's not a top tier D2, but when he was, I forget his freshman year, I forget where he played, but he was amazing. And so he went to Iowa State, didn't get a lot of run. Now he's back at Ohio playing at a high level again. So I'm going to go with Ohio at plus 750, just because this is a team. They definitely have not played nearly as well as Akron. as Akron, but who's at plus 115. But I'll take Ohio at plus 750. All right, so now we move on to the Mid-Eastern Conference, and we're all taking number 1 seed Norfolk State. Does anyone have any? And this, again, nobody in this conference gets a bye. It's the top 8. Howard has a really interesting player in Blake Harper, who's been one of the most productive freshmen in the country. But Howard also has 2 players that may not play in this tournament, and Bryce Harris, who's arguably their second best player, and Dom Campbell, their big former Notre Dame player, who's also injured. Brian Moore of Norfolk State, I would suspect, is going to win Player of the Year in this conference. But anybody have any other thoughts?
From what I've seen, it looks like a clear 2-horse race really between Norfolk State and South Carolina State. In Ken Palm, they're head and shoulders above everyone else in advanced statistics, differentials, offensive and defensive rating, true shooting percentage, everything. It's just those 2 ahead of everyone else. And I really like Brian Moore. I think he's a great player. South Carolina State doesn't have anyone averaging over 14 a game, which, I'm partial to my, the players that I know can have big games when I need them to. And I trust Norfolk State for that a lot more than I do South Carolina State. And Norfolk State kind of always seems to get into the tournament. I feel like I see them as a 16 seed in my bracket every year. So I'm rolling with Norfolk State.
All right. Any other thoughts? I will say, if I knew Howard was healthy, I definitely would take them at like plus 1,200. But I don't. So without that, I think that's partly played into the reason why maybe Howard is underachieved this year, is they just haven't quite had the health that they've needed. And to be honest, we picked Blake Harper to win Conference of the Year of this conference, and he's been totally bypassed by Blake Harper. So Blake Harper, if he does make March Madness, or if you get a chance to watch him, one of the best freshmen in the country. But of course, he's playing at a lower level. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Mountain West, and we know the Mountain West is always crazy. We have 1 seed. All these teams are getting buys. 1 seed, New Mexico at the top of the bracket, and then the 4-5 game is San Diego State and Boise State. By the way, this tournament is played in Vegas. Then we have 2 seed Colorado State, who's really surprised me this year, somewhat overachieved, in my opinion. And then we have Utah State, who's kind of going on a little bit of a skid lately. They were clearly in second place for most of the year. So, Josh, who you got?
Rich, I've been, riding this team all season. They've been my wagon in the sense of, making a little money off them. So I just got to roll with my Lobos. New Mexico, you've got the Mountain West Player of the Year and Donovan Dent. He's just been tremendous for this team. Nelly Jr. Joseph. I've thought Richard Pitino has done a tremendous job with this squad, turning them into the number 1 team in this country, in the Mountain West, my fault. And I believe, even if they don't come out on top in this conference, they're still, I believe, for an at-large bid. I think they're in the 9-10 slot. But I do think, looking at this bracket, they're probably matching up with Wyoming or San Jose State in the quarterfinals. That should be an easy route. In Boise and San Diego State, that should be, I think, a hard-fought a game. But, I think New Mexico wraps up in those games. But I think it's going to come down to them and Colorado State. I think they've done a great job the last couple games over there. But I'm still going to roll with my Lobos. I think they've done a tremendous job all season long. So go with them.
Yeah, Nico Medved really knows how to get his team to perform in the Mountain West. Performing in March Madness is another story. They usually get their heads handed to them. But, yeah, and again, beside Nick Clifford, who's probably the top pro prospect in this conference, along with Donovan Dent, I'd say they're, kind of like 1A, 1B. Colorado, unlike New Mexico, Colorado State really just has a bunch of guys, And there's nobody you can say like it's Neat Clifford and this guy and this guy. It's Neat Clifford and who else?
Dent's got help around him, which is they're a really good shooting team. And
New Mexico has like 6, 7 good players. I mean, good
wings. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention about this is as long as we're talking about NBA prospects, San Diego State has a freshman, Magoon
Guak. Yeah, he's something.
He's a freshman who can block shots like crazy. He's very skinny, but he also can shoot. Here's the problem though. He hasn't played lately because of a knee injury, and I have not heard anything about his status. Has anyone?
I have not.
With McGuath, San Diego State is a serious threat, not only in this tournament, but in March Madness. Without him, they're right back with the rest of the pack. All right, Drew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I'm with Colorado State here, and I totally agree with everything Josh said. New Mexico, first off, Donovan Dent not being one of those top 10 finalists for Point Guard of the Year, not saying he should have won it, was a travesty. That really pissed me off. Yeah. He should have been on that list. That to me, I'm so done with the major conference bias. That dude is legit. We talked about him, me, Jake, you, Rich, very early in the year. Saying,
we picked him Conference of the Year, Player of the Year, hands down.
Yeah, that dude is awesome. So I believe New Mexico's the best team. But when I'm looking at odds and everything, I picked Colorado State. They're playing their best basketball of the year right now. They're coming off some big wins. They just handled Utah State. They gutted one out against Boise State, which was kind of a must win for them in terms of even remotely kind of sitting on the bubble at all. So they're playing good ball. Neat Clifford is right up there, probably right behind Dent as the second best player in the conference, at least this year, the way he's been playing.
Yeah.
He's been doing
he
everything.
might be I mean,
yeah.
It's tough to it's a close
to carry that team.
Too. Yeah.
He's getting just enough help, but a big reason I took them was because they avoid that Boise State, San Diego State second round, like quarterfinals matchup. Like New Mexico is going to have to play one of those two teams in the second round. And while I think New Mexico is better, I think if San Diego State gets healthy, they're very dangerous. And Boise State's a physical team. Tyson Dangerhart is a veteran in this conference who, I've seen play live a bunch of times. And it's just not somebody I'd want to see in the quarterfinals. Whereas I think Fresno State's awful. They are freaking terrible.
Fresno and San Jose have been awful, and they've also been riddled by injuries and all kinds of.
Colorado State getting either Nevada or Fresno State, I feel very comfortable penciling them into the semis, and then they just handled Utah State. Utah State's on a slide.
Yeah, here's the other thing. UNLV doesn't have their best player, Didon Thomas, the point guard. Who last year produced stats very similar to Donovan Dent, but Donovan Dent has gone one direction and Didon Thomas has gone other, and now he's shut down. I shouldn't say he's shut down. I don't know his status for this tournament. Right now, he's questionable. Yeah. With Didon Thomas, though, UNLV is a challenge to Utah State, and Nevada could be a challenge to Colorado State, though they, too, lost a key player not too long ago, and that's Trey Coleman, who we had on the show a couple years ago. He's one of the best defensive players in this conference.
Yeah. So I just like the way it shapes up for Colorado State. They're playing good basketball. They have the second best player in the conference, in my opinion, who has a good chance of player of the year. Again, they avoid that San Diego State, Boise State matchup early. So heart tells me that New Mexico is the best team. I totally agree with that. Odds-wise, bracket-wise, I think Colorado State actually kind of gets a bit of a blessing in disguise at that 2 seed, getting to avoid that San Diego State, Boise State matchup.
Right. Joey?
Before I make my pick, I have a question. Do we know how many bids we're expecting out of this conference?
New Mexico's in no matter what.
Right.
And then I would think that you're going to get
I think San Diego State, maybe.
Without McGuath, I don't know. Or without Guath.
I think they've had some decent wins, though.
I think this conference is guaranteed 2, maybe 3.
I think 3 is the ceiling. I'm very New Mexico's in, and I do think San Diego gets in. San Diego does have some good wins, especially early. They beat Oregon. They beat Houston.
Right.
that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they do have wins in. They have beaten some of the good teams in here. Like I think it's two very comfortably, and I think that third is going to boil down to what does Boise, Utah State, and Colorado State are all going to fight for that third bid. One of those three teams has to make a run, though. The other two, I feel very confident. Kind of no matter what, I think they're locked in.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, because I was having a really hard time with this one, because I really think Colorado State, Boise State, Utah State, I feel like I would like to see all of them in March Madness. I think that honestly I would pick them over, some of the ACC teams that are getting March Madness consideration.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with your logic.
100%.
Here's the problem though. We've seen this conference get 4, 5, 6 bids, over the last few years. And every time they go in, besides San Diego State, they all get their heads handed to them. And the ACC's been just the opposite. The ACC, now, admittedly, this is the worst I've ever seen, shape I've ever seen the ACC. But in previous seasons, there's always been like 1 or 2 teams we thought they were left out of the Pittsburgh last year, for example. And the ACC goes into the tournament and no one thinks much of them. And they end up, with 1 team in the Final Four, maybe 2 teams in the Final Four. So, I think the Mountain West is going to get punished for underperforming in the tournament this year.
Yeah, and that's fair. And also it's a little different because, Mountain West competition is inherently worse than ACC.
Well, in Colorado State, Utah State, they don't challenge. Nevada, none of those teams go out and challenge themselves out of conference.
Right.
San Diego State does, Boise State does a little bit, New Mexico does a little bit, but the rest of them, they played nobody.
So Utah State's best win of the year is at St. Mary's 3 months ago, or whatever it was.
They set themselves up for failure by not testing themselves.
Right. My point is, there have been years where, we've seen 4 or 5 Mountain West teams get in, and those are years in which there have been a lot of good ACC teams get in. And, now that there are even less ACC teams, I feel like you could argue there are more spots. But the reason I bring it up is because I think there's so much individual talent in this conference. I've been looking at it, and it's really interesting how it's shaken up, because like the leaders of points per game have directly pretty much directly contributed, or directly connected to where they are in the tournament. You have Donovan Dent and New Mexico first, Clifford and Colorado State second, and then you have Dajan Hart and Ian Martinez third and fourth for the 3 and 5 teams. And I have such a hard time because I think all 4 of those players have been playing great. I think they're all really solid teams, but at the end of the day, I wanted to shake things up. I really thought about Colorado State. I really thought about New Mexico. I really like Dajan Hart and Boise State, but I'm going to go with Utah State here. I love Ian Martinez, former Terp. He seems to just step his game up every year. I mean, he started out in Maryland as, an off-the-bench role player, averaging 6 a game. He had that season-ending injury, and I was kind of like, okay, this is probably the last we're going to see of him. But he's been at Utah State a few years now, and he just gets better and better and better. And he's proven the ability to be a number 1 guy and to be a good scorer. And we talked about a little bit earlier, Utah State, they just, they go through coach after coach, and they just always seem to win, and they always seem to have good players, and they always seem to play well. And, they've been on a little bit of slump as of late, but, I like Ian Martinez. I like this Utah State team, and it's a shame. I would just love to see, 4 or 5 of these teams get into March Madness, because I think talent-wise, I've been looking at brackets, potential upsets, and I'm seeing some, 5, 6, 7 seeds that I think a lot of these teams could give a real run for their money.
Up until maybe the first 2 years in the show, I think we used to make an argument like you did about this conference. And in the last couple of years, they've had, I think, a total of 10 bids in the tournament. And San Diego State's been the only team to actually have any success. I love this conference because a lot of the teams are very nice to us. We've had Ian Martinez on the show. We've had Tyson Degenhart on the show. And
we had Osterbor last year.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we always get a lot of players from this conference on the show. But I really think, based on what the odds makers are telling me, San Diego State is plus 625 and Boise is plus 430. I think they're telling me Guath isn't playing.
Yeah.
Okay. And without Guath, I think that eliminates, I think Boise moves on. and loses to New Mexico. And to me, that will be New Mexico's biggest challenge. Really, I think Boise is the toughest team for them to beat. And I don't know who's going to win between Utah and Colorado State. The way they've been playing, I would say Colorado State. But Utah State definitely has, there's one thing that team does is have depth. They got a lot of different pieces they can rotate in and out. No real star beside Martinez. But yeah, interesting conference. But bottom line is I'm going to New Mexico. I just think they have the best player. One of the two best players in this conference. I think they have the best team. They don't have great depth, but they have enough depth. And I think, again, I said this last year, I thought they were a team to watch in March Madness. They're not as good. Last year, this same group had JT Toppin, who was just
JT Toppin was still there. Oh my God.
Big 12 player of the year. He was just big 12 player of the year. This team was the same team plus JT Toppin. That's why I loved them last year.
Yeah.
So they're not as good as last year, but I still think they win this tournament at plus 245. The SEC these days kind of reminds me of the Death Star. I don't know about you guys, but they're like the Death Star. It's just so much talent. It's just so much better. I mean, we said this preseason again. Drew and I did the preview, and we said, man, talent in this conference is just heads above everybody else. And it's proven to, talent doesn't always equate into wins, but it has. So we got the top 4 seeds get 2 byes. Auburn at 1 and Tennessee at 4 at the top half of the bracket. Lower half of the bracket, we have 2 Florida, 3 Alabama. Teams that could sneak through here. I mean, come on. We could start with there's 8 teams that have to play in. So I should say this. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Missouri, Kentucky, they get only 1 bye, while the top 4 get 2 byes. And then you have teams that start at the beginning: Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Texas, Mississippi State, Georgia. They don't even get a bye. Oklahoma. Those teams could make noise. Oh my God, this tournament. Josh, who you got?
This is by far, I believe, the best conference in college basketball. I'm very high on this one team. I believe that the Florida Gators are going to win this tournament. I have them going to the Final Four and potentially winning the national championship. I think this team has everything you need for they're in top 10 KenPom efficiency, top 10 in defense as well. They've got an All-American in Walter Clayton Jr. This is a Rick Pitino guy, so he's getting down. He's averaging a steal a game defensively, one of the best guards in the country. I think he's really stepped up big for this Florida offense. Elijah Martin, who I thought was a good transfer coming out of FAU, but I mean, I didn't think he'd come out like this, averaging 15 a game, shooting 35% from 3 on high efficiency. So it's great to see. I think Will Richard's been amazing as well. I think one of the most underrated players in this country, Thomas Haw, has done so much for this team, rebounding the ball on great numbers, 9 and 6. I think every time I turn on like a Gators game and I see Thomas Haw out there, he's getting on the floor, he's scratching, he's so physical out there. And again, you need that in March. And they've got 2 of the best wins I've seen in college basketball. And they won at Auburn, which was they absolutely killed Auburn in that game. The whole game, they held them on. It was great to see. They beat them at Alabama as well. This team, they have everything that you need. And I think this team is primed for a big run in this tournament and as well in March Madness.
Drew, who you got?
Yeah, I'm going with the Gators. Look, I love Janai Broome. Auburn's had such a good year. You just look at the overall resume. Absolutely love them. But man, Florida is such a complete team. I totally agree with Josh, 100%. They have won games that have shown me the ability to beat anybody, anywhere, face down the Goliath, beat them. I mean, you talk about all the guys. One guy that I talked about, Rich, and you talked about earlier when we did the preview is Alex Condon. He's been awesome. I know he missed some time with that ankle injury. I think he missed 2 games, but he's been that great anchor for them. in the middle. I mean, he's giving you 11 in 8 a game, blocking almost, shot and a half a game. You combine that with all these guards, they can just beat you in so many ways. Look, I was always on the fence about Todd Golden at USF. I always thought that, hey man, I to this day thought it might have been a premature hire, but man, I have to give credit.
All women on campus are on the fence about him too.
Well, from a pure basketball standpoint, I have to tip cap and just be like, look, he has done an awesome job. I was worried that he would not be able to handle all this talent and manage egos and win these big games in such a good conference he has. I'm with Josh. This team to me is not just going to win this tournament. I think this team, along with Houston, might be my two favorite teams in the country to really make a run this year. You can't ignore what Auburn's done, but man, this team is playing such good basketball right now.
Yeah. I made the joke about Golden, but by the way, he really wasn't cleared per se by a court of law or anything like that. All it was it was dismissed because the ruling was about Title 9?
Title 9.
Yeah, Title 9. So since the girls didn't come from the University of Florida specifically, I believe, or weren't students, that was my understanding. I read the ESPN write-up. So basically it was tossed out on a technicality. And that's the scoop. So Joey, what do you got here?
Well, Rich, just like you did last episode, I'm staying true to my previous predictions. From the start of the year, I had Bama in the national championship, and I don't know if I have them winning it all anymore because they had a little bit of a slump, but I still have them winning this tournament, and I still have them going very, very far. They had a slight hiccup there in the middle, had losses against Auburn, losses against Florida, a big loss against Tennessee, but they had a huge win against Auburn overtime on that Mark Sears game winner. So their, momentum is shifting in the right direction at the right time. I love Mark Sears. I think he, when he gets hot, he is one of the best players in the nation. I love Nate Oates' philosophy, threes and layups, no mid-ranges. Mathematically, it works. It's funny, I read that and I watched some clips on it. I'm like, oh, there's no way they take no mid-ranges in the game. They literally take no mid-ranges in the game. I've never seen anything like it. But, I like the creativity. I like the math behind it. I'm a big fan of his philosophy. They have solid shooters. They have Holloway. They have Phylon, both guys that can get hot from three. They have, big athletic bigs in Amori. Diabate is just a ball of energy. Grant Nelson, I just did the math on this. When I was looking at this when I was watching the Auburn game, they are now 10-0 in games where Grant Nelson scores over 15 points. So getting him going is going to be huge. And we've seen, in the tournament last year that is not a problem for him to get going in big games. And we saw it against Auburn. So yeah, I just absolutely love this Bama team. I don't know if I have them winning at all just because their defense is a little shaky. We know the Ken Palm rule, top 20 offense, top 30 defense, or maybe I flipped that. And they don't fall quite in there, but I think they're a great team, and I think they're going to go far and win this tournament.
So Joey, if I use your logic, I would pick Alabama as well. I thought they were the overall going to win this conference. They just had overwhelming talent in terms of returners and new guys and freshmen. And they just haven't looked quite the way I expect. I think Mark Sears and Grant Nelson just haven't been consistent. They haven't been dominant like some other players in this conference. I just don't see Alabama being in Florida or Auburn's class right now. Now, if you would ask me about 2 weeks ago, I'd probably be picking Missouri here. With the nice odds. And I said to you guys in the group chat, I said, I think I'm quoting myself. I said, Missouri's a badass team. Watch out for them in March. I don't think they've won a game since.
Jinxed them.
So I think they've lost 4 of their last 5 or 4 in a row. It's incredible. it seems like Dennis Gates is playing around with his lineup this late in the season. I don't know why.
I don't know.
He had a nice rotation going there, and now all of a sudden he's playing these guys like their top freshmen who's hardly played all year. Now he's getting minutes, and but anyway, I digress. I don't know what's going on in Missouri. Another sleeper here, I think, is Kentucky, team that I picked for the Final Four. And I think they would be the one sleeper. Kentucky still has the offense to, basically score on anybody in the country, even the defenses of, like Auburn's and Tennessee's. But I just don't think they have enough defense. And they lost Jackson Robinson, so that hurts. So I'm going with Florida. I think they're the most complete team. I think they shoot better than Auburn. I think they have the capability, and Condon. Oh my God, what a gifted
Beast.
What a
He's been
guy.
so good.
He is just so quick down the court. And he's only a sophomore, and the kid is so athletic at 6'11". He is, and he's tough. He's on the slight side, but he's not skinny. But he's on the slighter side. But man, and Walter Clayton can once he crosses half court, he can make a three. The team has depth. You don't have to worry about foul trouble. You don't have anybody like Chad Baker-Mazara on the team that could get thrown out at any minute. I don't know what's wrong with that kid. I'm
Dude,
serious.
I don't know what's up with him.
There is something wrong with that kid. He cannot stop himself. He can't.
And to be fair, it's also I will say he's not a kid that's a grown ass.
He's 25. He's
25 years old.
25 years old. And the other day when he got thrown out, he hit Youngblood in the head once.
Oh, yeah.
And that wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough for him. So then he did it a second time harder. And
I think he has like another year of eligibility as well.
Oh my God.
You're gonna need a cane next season.
People say he's
26 years old.
People say he's a pro prospect. I don't. Not with this baggage he brings with him, and not at this age. I mean, he's
25 years old.
At 25 years old, he should be dominating 18-year-old kids. Yeah. Jesus Christ. He's old enough to be their fathers. Excuse my French.
Actually.
All right. So, we got two more tournaments. Drew had to skip out because he has an emergency at his school, which, by the way, this is the unknown fact. Drew wasn't supposed to, I don't think he was supposed to be helping with the baseball team at Sonoma, and he is. And I believe the emergency call was he has to do Tommy John surgery on someone tonight. That joke only Drew would appreciate because, basically they ask him to do anything and everything. It's just incredible. All right. So, and we move on to the SWAC, one of the weakest, if not the weakest conference in the country. Picked Grambling to win this conference in the preseason. Jake and I did, and we were like, might as well just toss a coin. Nobody's any good in this conference. Our preseason pick, Jake and I's preseason pick, Grambling went, and that was mainly based on who was coming back on the team. There was no big time imports into this conference, in terms of transfer portal or freshmen coming in. So Grambling had the most cohesion, and they ended up finishing 8th in the conference. Southern and Jackson State, which was my pick last year. And Bethune-Cookman were the three best teams in this conference. Southern 15-3, Jackson State 14-4, Bethune-Cookman 13-5, and then Alabama State, Texas Southern 12-6. Boy, oh boy, who you got? Who you got, Josh?
So I'm just gonna go. I can't say I know much about SWAC basketball, but I'm gonna go with the big dogs. We're going with Southern University at plus 165. It's really a toss-up. I can't say I've watched a lot of SWAC basketball. But looking from it, they've got, some decent scores. I think whoever comes out on top of this tournament will end up playing in the first four, one of the 16 seeds.
Yep.
So I can't say, there's a lot of talent, but, we're going to go with Southern University at plus 165.
Yeah. Joey, what do you got?
Yeah, it's a great tournament. It's a battle of who's going to get smacked by 35 against Auburn in the first round of the tournament.
True.
I got Southern as well. I'm looking at advanced statistics here. They are far and away killing everyone else in the conference. Efficiency differential with 9.5. After that, there's Alabama State with 1.4, Texas with Southern with 1, and then everyone else in the negatives. It's not a great conference. Um, if you look at Ken Palm, Southern's ahead. They, 3 games ahead of anyone else in total record. So I will be riding with Southern here, but don't expect much noise from anyone, regardless of who wins.
Yeah, I'm going with Southern. They're definitely the most consistent. As you said, in terms of net rating, which is basically offensive rating minus defensive rating, they're the only team that's significantly above zero. So yeah, I'm going to ride with Southern here as well. And the odds, what are they? +2,
Plus 165
plus
for
165.
Southern.
So, part of me wants to go with Jackson State, which is a team I liked last year because of Deshaun Ruffin, who was like a former McDonald's All-American, who started at Ole Miss, and I'm not going to go through his whole story, but he's basically got hurt, and he's never really seemed to recover and get back, regain his form. So, but I guess that's a team I would look out for in this tournament and think about. At plus, I think they're plus 300. All right, now we move on to the WAC, a conference we figured would be dominated by Grand Canyon. And because Grand Canyon has, like McNeese, has become kind of like the powerhouses of smaller mid majors, kind of. Now, I'm not talking like mid majors like, VCU. I'm talking about kind of like teams that were pretty far off the radar, just a couple years ago, and now they're right up there. However, Grand Canyon's had some issues this year, and they only finished second in this conference. And I haven't watched I watched Grand Canyon quite a bit early in the season, and if you remember last year in the tournament where they almost made the Sweet 16, they took Alabama to overtime, I believe. It was Tyon Grant Foster who was just dominant in the NCAA tournament. Alabama couldn't stop him, and whoever they beat in the first round, I think that was St. Mary's. St. Mary's, I think. Couldn't stop him. Here's the thing: Grant Foster wasn't available early in the season, and then when he came back, he wasn't playing like he did last year, and now he's out again. And I'm not so sure who is if he's going to be available for this tournament. Maybe they're saving him for the NCAAs, but this team's not making because they played a decent schedule of preseason, but this team doesn't have the resume that I think if Foster was healthy and they may have been able to pull off some good wins early in the season. They had the opportunities, but they didn't come through, and they haven't quite gelled this year. But still watch out for them if Grant Foster is healthy. All right, Josh, who you got here? Oh, by the way, Utah Valley won the conference with a 15-1 record. Grand Canyon was second at 13-3, and then everyone else was, right around 500 or below.
So yeah, on topic of, GCU, I'm still, even though, Grant Foster hasn't been playing, I'm still going to roll with them. They're currently the favorites at plus 135. They've had success in the past, winning this conference. They had a little bit of a down year, but even so, 23-7, second in the WAC. They're still, one of the best teams in this conference. One of the better teams mid-major wise. So, I'm still going to go with them. I think Jacoby Coles has stepped up big time without Tyon Grant Foster. He's averaging 14 a game, good shooting splits. He's shooting 50% from the field. I think the three balls, big question for this team. It's, not the shooting hasn't been great this year, but, I think it all depends also, if they're really, saving time on Grant Foster. It's been out since, mid-February, and if he gets, he's healthy, plays what he can. I think this team has a great shot of, winning this conference and even winning a few games maybe in the tournament.
Right, right. Joey?
Yeah, I got Grand Canyon as well. Like Josh said, they've had consistent success in the tournament. They're not the number one seed, but they are number one in efficiency differential rating. They're number one in Ken Palm. And like we said, Tyon Grant Foster, he was huge for them last year. We don't know what the status of his injury is. We know he has an ankle injury. I feel like if it was something season ending, we would know by now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but if it's, a sprain or, something like that, it's very possible that, he's just in a lot of pain, so they're not playing him right now. But, maybe it's the type of injury we've seen, players play through ankle sprains and just kind of tough it out, take some painkillers before games, and maybe they're just saving him for that. And if not, they also have a player I really like, Jacoby Coles. He's played a few years at TCU, and he wasn't just like a bench warmer. He was getting actual minutes, being a real contributor. Hit a big game winner for them last year. He's averaging 14 a game now that he's in the WAC, and if Tyon Grant Foster is healthy and you have both of those guys, that's huge because those are two really, really quality players in a conference that doesn't have too much of that. And even if not, Grand Canyon, they've succeeded before. They have all the advanced metrics on their side, and they have a solid go-to player in Jacoby Coles. So I got the Lopes.
All right. So first of all, I want to just talk a second about Utah Valley because they do have some decent talent. They have Trayvon Lenhart, who is a solid point guard. They have Carter Welling is a center, legit big man. They also have Tanner Tolson. If anyone knows about the Tolson family, I think Jake was the last one to play for BYU. They all can shoot. They're all buckets from three. I'm surprised Jake didn't go to, or Tanner didn't go to BYU, but BYU's got a pretty loaded roster, so he ended up at Utah Valley. So they do have talent at Utah Valley. However, Grand Canyon really, I think even without Grant Foster, really has superior talent. I don't know if you guys remember Luke War, their power forward. He's an athletic forward, can play some center. He can also shoot the three. They have Duke Brennan, who was a transfer from Arizona. He's a legit 7-footer. Rayshawn Harrison has led this conference in scoring in previous years. I think he was a conference player of the year a few years back. They even have guys like Makai Williams, who came over from UT Arlington. He was freshman of the year last year in this conference. He's not playing a lot for Grand Canyon, so that says something right there. With Tyon Grant Foster, it's Grand Canyon's, certainly a lock to win this. I think would be a lock to win this tournament and make noise in March Madness. Without him, I still think they have enough talent, so I'll take the odds, which are plus 135. All right. So that basically wraps up the show, gentlemen. And I want to bring up the mailbag, but again, I've been so busy. But please, we will get to your questions, especially draft questions. We'll be talking a lot about the draft once March Madness is over. So if you'd like to send us a question, please email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions via social media at Hoops Prospects, on Instagram at The Hoops Prospects, and on Facebook at Hoops Pros. And as always, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us. And if you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. We will be back next week, next Monday night, I believe. And we will be going through the bracket. We'll pick a collective bracket and come up with our collective Final Four, a collective champion, and also give our individual Final Four picks and our individual champion. Yeah, so March Madness is definitely rolling along, and we'll really get down to it next week when we pick our tourney bracket. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Let's pray for an Ohio State miracle in the Big Ten tournament.
Let's go, Hoosiers. Got a big game.
Yeah, you sounded like you thought Oregon was definitely going to beat them. You think that's...
Oh, me? No. I said, I think we do have a very good shot against Oregon. But when we match up with Michigan State,
yeah.
even though we did beat them at the Breslin Center, which was a big win.
Right.
I just think it's March. You can't bet out on Izzo. That's fine.
Yeah. I could see them beating Oregon, but I can't see them beating Michigan State.
Yeah.
All right. Good show, folks. And good show, guys. And we'll see you next week.